guys ready? Sarah, you ready? Go ahead and call to order the USD 489 Board of Education Board meeting for Monday, January 14th, 2019. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Would make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. It's been moved by Board Member Oborny, second by Board Member Bickle. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Oh, Paul, is Paul here?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see him. All right. Next, we have audience participation. This is the one and only opportunity for anybody in the audience to speak to the board.
Good evening. My name is Alan Park, and I'm a retired principal from Washington Elementary School. I'm a parent. I've been a parent of USD 49 students for the last 24 years. I still have 2 students in school right now. And of course, a taxpayer and a citizen of our great city. There's just a few things that I would like to ask that you're having a very important decision tonight on the next step of Washington School, and I would just have a couple questions I'd like you to consider. First of all, why are we in a hurry? I know there's a lot of things going on, but I just don't quite understand. We found out about this 27 days ago, and we're going to possibly act on it tonight. Is there a possibility of maybe slowing the process down a little bit and taking a little bit of time? The other thing is, where did we get the evaluation? Were they comps locally, or like there was concern about another property that we talked about? Are they from outside of the community? Other things I'd like to maybe check on is, have we ever sold property like this before to allow the purchaser a year with $5,000 to control the property and to say no? I don't know if we've ever done that before, and to allow them to a year to raise the funds. Also, why don't we give other developers in our community the same opportunity? Maybe they have. I don't know. Maybe you could talk about that. But is that something that other people in our community would like the opportunity, but they don't have the opportunity because we're acting so fast? The other thing is, who is the Overland Property Group? I mean, do we know who the investors are? Are they part investors in our community, or are they all from outside of our community? I know they've done some great work in our community. They've taken over vacant land, and they have developed it and made affordable housing that has been very helpful to our community, and I think that is very beneficial. But where's the history on that? When did we find out about this proposal, and why? I know one of our goals is to be transparent. When was it proposed to you, and when did you get that information? Those are just a few things that I'm concerned about. I was wondering if you could address that maybe in your discussion and just see, is this the best decision for our community? Is this the best decision for our district? And this is the best decision for our kids? Just like some more clarification on those things. Thank you for your time. Thank you for serving on the board also.
Thank you, Mr. Park. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. If not, we'll move on to communications from other organizations. The first one is the Hayes Recreation Commission December 19, 2018 agenda and minutes included in our packet. The next two are Early Childhood Connections Director's Report from December 14, 2018, and the approval of the 2017-2018 Early Childhood Connections Annual Report. Is there anything that needs to be presented on these two? Or are they just for reference? Okay. The next thing is the Hour of Code presentation from the Hayes Middle School Tech TA members, including Cooper Kistner and Carter Normandin, and they will present about the Hour of Code.
Hi, I'm Cooper Kistner, and
I'm Carter Normandin.
we're gonna tell you about the Hour of Code and what our school used it. The Hour of Code is a 1 hour of coding that is that introduces students to computer science. It is a global learning event and is a free app and website that you can use to code activities from something that doesn't work that great to something that actually works. The Hour of Code took place on the Computer Science Education Week on the first week of December. And the HMS Tech team led the each TA in the Hour of Code this year on week of December 3rd. Each TA coded for 2 TA classes for a total of an hour over the week. And students used both the app and the Swift Playgrounds and the Hour of Code website.
This website and app are important because there's almost 571,000 jobs opening up for computer science and only about 49,000 graduates. The website allows students to pick which grade they feel most comfortable in and if they're a beginner or if they're comfortable coding. And then they can choose an app. The students can choose an app or a game like Dance Party. If they are more interested in learning more about coding, they can go to these websites. And here are some pictures of students using Swift Playgrounds. We'll also be inviting all HMS TAs to join us in spending time learning about Spiros and Ozobots. Are there any questions?
So is this, just a question, so you found the coding enjoyable, you're looking towards a career in coding? Are you looking towards a career in coding?
Like, am I, like,
Yeah,
are we?
like you.
Wait, repeat that.
So, does this make you interested in getting a job as a computer scientist?
No, not me.
Not really, okay. So where do you see you can, and your friend there can answer too, so there are places that you're going to be using coding after this week's event?
We may not, but we have a group that we have a website that they can, part of a link on the Hayes Middle School website that they change for intramurals, the birthdays of the week, and all of that. And so they use it.
Okay.
Did you guys get to use the Spiro and the Ozobot? Did you guys get to use those?
Yes.
What's an example of what you can do with that?
Well, you can program them to take like certain maneuvers and follow lines.
Do your homework, pick up your laundry?
No.
No? So nothing complex, is that what you're
No.
saying? Okay.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next, we will have the Wilson Elementary School Site Council report.
Good evening. You coming up here or you guys staying there? I brought with me Mrs. O'Connor, our school counselor, and Alyssa Deese, third grade teacher. And I was going to mention our site council members, but we meet January 28th. Nancy Stramel is a community member. Heather Musels of Fort Hays State and faculty member and parent. Ron Chartier is a community business employee and parent, and Mike Smith is a representative from a social service agency from Department of Corrections Juvenile Division, and he is also a parent in our building. So it's kind of nice to have all of those entities represented. And then we have 2 other teachers on site council, a kindergarten teacher and a 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Carlene and Mrs. Hoskins. And I apologize, I will have to leave after this too because we have another engagement with Boy Scouts. So I called this our State of the School. It will not last as long as the State of the State or State of the Nation address, so just in case you're worried about that. Which one, Shanna? I think it is. There we go. I started with our mission statement, which was something that we revisited the beginning of last year and developed as an entire faculty. And because our mission statement had been very academic focused, and we really felt like we wanted to return to the whole child. And so you see that our mission statement reflects that. We felt like it's important to address. We wanted to create or cultivate, we want to grow lifelong learners and leaders who excel academically, socially, and emotionally. So it kind of broadens the scope past just academics. Our faculty has met, this was an extensive process, which I'm sure you've heard from other schools as well, to develop our goals in KESA. And you know, as a district, we chose relationships and relevance. And so our relationship goal has to do with the relationships we have specifically with families, but the teachers felt like it was important to broaden that to community as well. So we kind of focused on both pieces of that. And then in regards to relevance, they wanted to, some of the issues that we've seen are in regards to student social and emotional well-being. And so that's going to be our focus for the next 3 years of this cycle, is to improve students' overall social and emotional well-being. In addition to that, these goals are goals that the site council has maintained, which is that academic success, a quality education for every child in every classroom every day, and those have been goals of the district for a very long time. Assist students in improving behavior by identifying the root cause. And then the site council feels like technology is important to extend and support student learning in all subjects, and also give them the technology skills they need to be successful in a 21st century workforce, which is also a KESA goal. So in a state of the state, kind of want you to see where we are. This is Wilson. This is straight off of the KSDE building report card. So we are, as an elementary, the elementary with the lowest number, the lowest percentage of free and reduced student population. We have 32%, which isn't enough for us to qualify for title reading. So we do not have any reading intervention services other than what the teachers provide themselves and what we use technology for in the form of iStation and IXL and Reflex Math. So some of those pieces that are adaptive are all that we have. And that has been a challenge for our teachers. And this is the fourth year that we do not qualify as a title school. So even though we don't qualify as a title school, I would say it's a measure to see what students are at risk. It's not the only measure to determine what students are at risk, but we have 32% of our students, that's 1 in every 3, that would be considered at risk by the state's definition, and yet we still don't have any reading intervention. So it's definitely a challenge. And our average class size, because our total number of students is 396, that makes our average class size 22.1. And it's higher at K1-2 than 3-4-5. And you know, we've capped those at 23 for K1-2 and at 25 for 3-4-5. But I will tell you, kindergarten classes of 23 are a challenge. And as our kindergarten teachers have gone to trainings across the state, they've been to 2 just in the past 2 months. As we compare to other kindergartens around the state that are at the trainings, so that's fair to say, we have the highest kindergarten enrollment of any of those kindergartens. And it just presents other unique challenges. So, as does the no reading intervention. This is attendance rate is something that the state is tracking. Now, an attendance rate, you look at 2 different things. Our attendance or overall attendance rate is very strong as compared to the district and the state. But then the other thing the state is tracking is chronically absent, which, if you remember, the definition of that is any students who have missed both excused and unexcused absences that are absent for greater than 10% of the days, and our chronically absent rate is 6.75%. So if you think about of 400 students, there are over 25 students that we need to track and monitor and put on intervention because they are absent more than 10% of the days. And sometimes it's a one year because they have a significant illness. But if it's a trend over time, then it's something that we monitor and intervene. Questions about any of that? I apologize for the way this is the way it downloaded from the state. I wish they would group the years together, but you notice they did not for math. In math, if this is all grades, so 3rd, 4th, and 5th that take the state assessments, we have 48.5% in 2018 that were at levels 3 or 4, which is what's considered proficient or better. It's where we want all of our students to be, as compared to the state average, which was, I didn't write that down for some reason in the math. See how good my eyes are. In 2018, if you look at the state, it's just at 30, almost 33%, 32.8, 32.85. So we're significantly above the state. And this similar trend in 2017. English language arts, 2018, we have 49.5% at levels 3 or 4. And at the state level, it's 37.2. 2017, very similar. And the same with science. Oops. In 2018, we had 53.8% that were considered where we would like them to be at level 3 or 4, and 37.2% at the state level. And that's 2018. 2017, it's very similar. And as I said, our whole focus isn't on academics, but academics has to be part of our focus because we want our students to do well and we want to know that teaching and learning is taking place. So, is it 75%? What is the state's target now as we look at accreditation? 75%, we're moving toward trying to get 75% of students at level 3 or 4. Which, as you can see, there's significant growth that needs to take place. If you look at our systems, what do you want to say here? As Tara and I were looking at this, we were thinking that's a lot of committees. But each committee has a distinct function. Our building leadership team is our kind of academic ship that looks at academic data and makes decisions on interventions and makes decisions on direction. That they like data a lot. Our We Care team is that social emotional piece, and that's our foundations team that's received training that goes to Hutchinson, that's looked at the structure of the school system, and I'll share in a little bit some of the projects that they've taken on or places around the school that they've tackled. Our GET team is what other schools sometimes call as the SIT or SAT team. It's our general ed intervention team, and that's where we bring students who maybe are struggling and have discussions about how to best intervene and problem solve, and then put interventions into place and then come back and discuss them. And that team meets once a month. We intentionally meet in vertical teams, and what that means is like we try to get grade levels together so that kindergarten and first grade have intentional conversations. Second and third grade have intentional conversations. Fourth and fifth grade meet, and then every other time that vertical teams meet, it will be they will either meet up or meet down, so they can have conversations about curriculum, conversations about social emotional pieces. We have a building crisis team, grade level professional learning communities, and that time is the time that's built in. There's 30 minutes a week that's built in for every grade level in the district to get together, so they get together at the building level and meet. Our special education team intentionally meets as well, and our specials teachers, we were able to carve out, it's not a lot of time, but once a month our specials teachers are able to get together and meet over lunch and just share information, which really I think helps them, because sometimes they feel like they're out in the cold and don't get to collaborate with the regular teachers. So that would be art, music, PE, library, and our tech lab supervisor. So kind of as we looked at our building, we wanted to put things into the redesign principles. What are we doing that already fits, and what direction, what would we like to do? So if you look at the community partnerships and programs that we already have, we work, as do all schools, work very closely with the Hayes Arts Council. We have several classes in our building that have a partnership with Via Christi and have a regular schedule to meet, to go to Via Christi, and they interact with the residents intentionally. We have Ag in the Classroom that comes to kindergarten and second grades. The Sternberg Museum, we try to take advantage of as many programs there that we can. We have career programs that take place every year in kindergarten, and several other grades have a version of the career program. Tiger Pals is a collaboration. I think you've heard of it. Some of you have heard their presentation through Fort Hays State. That was something that was established 3 years ago, and they continue to meet with and mentor at-risk and special ed youth. And then this year we've added our partnership with the Dane G. Hansen. They have a Northwest Kansas Learns that's kind of a traveling field trip opportunity where the Kansas Cosmosphere and the Rolling Hills Zoo will bring exhibits to us. And so we've already had the Cosmosphere come and present, and then Rolling Hills Zoo is coming this spring. But that's exciting because those are opportunities that we haven't had, and they fund it fully. So Dane G. Hansen's been very generous in that aspect. Then we looked at real-world applications, things like our career programs and some of our community programming, problem-based learning. And then how do we personalize learning? Just the curriculum that is the Readers and Writers Workshop models is very personalized by nature. It's very differentiated by student ability. And then second step is our social emotional curriculum that we will pilot starting this semester. We just received the money for that from it's Dane G. Hansen, but it's through the Heartland Community Foundation. We received a $3,400 grant to purchase that social emotional learning curriculum. And we're excited about that. And then through we have an after-school academics and intervention program. We have one room that runs academics that's like a homework help for 3rd through 5th grade. And then we have another room that is an intervention room that we run and parents pay, but it's run as an intervention room where students can receive math and reading intervention help since we don't have intervention during the school day. As we look at student success skills, which is the last redesign principle, we kind of brainstorm some of the things that we are trying to do to help set students up for success, such as our teachers complete a social emotional screener that looks at both internalizing and externalizing behaviors to see if we can flag students who may be struggling. And we do that twice a year. We're working on piloting that curriculum to implement starting this semester. Something teachers have asked for is to go back to a partner classroom. I'm not sure what to call that, but classroom family. So as we're working on the master schedule for next year, we're going to build in intentional time where each classroom has a partner, like a buddy classroom. So 5th grade will buddy up with 2nd grade, 4th grade will buddy up with 1st grade, and 3rd grade will buddy up with kindergarten. And as we talked, we're going to use some of those older kids, especially who are struggling in some of those social emotional pieces. What they are struggling with will be what they go down and teach to their buddy classroom. So kind of trying to incorporate some of those that, the best way to learn something is to teach it to others. Try to incorporate those best principles using the relationships that they will have already established. We have a 5th grade program called Wilson Role Models, and they help out around the building and kind of take ownership in things in the building. They take care of recycling. They pick up balls at the end of the day. They help out in kindergarten, like in younger classrooms. And take pride in the building. They have many jobs. They greet students in the morning and help them get where they need to go, whether it's breakfast or outside. Something we've incorporated this year. You want to talk about Mindful Mondays?
Mindful Mondays are part of the mindfulness movement, part of getting students focused for the week. And what we do is we have a Mindful Monday reading every Monday, and Mrs. Sheevy reads it over the announcements. The students have the opportunity to practice, and then each teacher gets a copy of that card. And most of them put those cards in their calm corners or peace corners. We are also putting an emphasis as we spend more time with indoor recess or kind of getting back into the groove after the holiday season and after the breaks, taking mindfulness breaks throughout the week, throughout the day when we see students getting restless as well. So that's a mindfulness. If you've done any research on mindfulness and focusing with intent, there's a lot of really good research out there about how that improves learning.
Well, and that kind of goes to, I skipped ahead a few slides. That's part of our trauma responsive practices. We've really tried to focus this year especially, and we've trained staff on learning to know the what behind the why, or learning to know the why behind the what students exhibit. Not to excuse the behavior, but just to help explain it so that we can approach it from a what happened to you and how are we going to help you get past it perspective versus a what's wrong with you and trying to punish the student. And so we've, the counselors have trained all of the students across the district in the mood meters, which is a part of students identifying what emotion they're feeling so they can name it, and then kind of tying that to the mindfulness, recognizing when they're starting to feel upset so that they can, it's self-regulate, self-calm, self-soothe. We have calm corners or a safe spot or a peace corner in every classroom that teachers have identified and taught students how to utilize. And then some of those pieces of that, the foundations that we've talked about that teachers have been trained in, all of those structuring the classroom for success build into that trauma responsive, because we know that students do better when there is a routine and a structure that is predictable, it feels safe, and they know what to expect. So, and then the last piece of that, if you see, is the teacher self-care. Teachers have to take care of themselves and not allow themselves to be dysregulated or overextended. So we've worked on that as well within our building, both and intentionally, like our teachers have yoga on once a month on Wednesdays. There are some things that we do to try to take care of teachers. Okay, and then our teachers have really focused on growth mindset versus fixed mindset and tried to pass that along to students and teachers. And is Alan still here? Monty Selby came. Alan helped set up Monty Selby coming back to Hayes, and he was here Friday. And he did a great job on that, talking about it's not hard, it's just not easy yet. It was a really good, did a nice job.
We had that written up in my classroom today.
Yeah, he did a great job reinforcing it, and the kids really enjoy Monty, so we appreciated that. Mrs. O'Connor led a generosity project. We've collected food for our Wilson Food Bank twice now, because we send home food from the food bank in addition to what Sarah collects on Thanksgiving and Christmas. We send it home at least a couple of times a month. We have been lately.
Yes, we have a food pantry within my office, and as needed for families that request or we see a need, we will send home food to those families. We know that the most stressful times are when sometimes assistance funds run out, or between paycheck situations where food can become a scarcity. So we do keep a food pantry in the building. Part of the advantage of that is that we can put it in backpacks discreetly. We also know that families that struggle with food scarcity sometimes struggle with fuel scarcity, and that saves them a trip to driving to another location to get food. It is already sent home with them, so it's been a good program.
We work with the Kansas Food Bank just like every other school does, and we have 25 bags that go home every week in backpacks. So I don't know what the district number is. Do you know? But I know at elementaries our numbers have grown every year. Celebration is a new playground equipment, also helped to make possible by a Dane G. Hansen grant. There was a $5,000 Dane G. Hansen grant. We spent about $33,000 of home and school money, and $38,000 of home and school money and $33,000 of after school care funds. So it was kind of a melding of funds in order to be able to purchase the playground equipment, but it has been helpful. Our old equipment was past its warranty and had a lot of broken pieces that had already been patched in places, and we've replaced a couple of slides, and it had hiding places which were unsafe. We had students that would hide, so the caveat on this one was it had to be wide open. So, and this comes with a play curriculum that the PE teacher is using with students, which is nice. I mentioned our We Care team. They have tackled many projects, including the playground, lunchroom. Like we have kind of, as we've seen issues, it's morphed into, they have looked at specials and helped prepare. They now have every specials teacher identify what it is they want students to do when they enter their classroom. And since at elementary, students don't have specials every day, they may only see that teacher twice a week. The regular teacher reminds the student, what is it that you need to do when you first get into the classroom? What's the teacher want? And so it just kind of helps make that transition from the regular classroom to the specials classroom. And we feel like that's helped quite a bit. We did at the beginning of this year, we surveyed staff on what were the student behaviors that were causing the most difficulty. And then Mrs. O'Connor intentionally created lessons and went into the class to teach those lessons. And at each grade level, it was somewhat different. For example, we know at one grade level, we've identified that they have difficulty respecting substitutes. And so that was a specific lesson to address that. Just some explicit teaching. We've done staff trainings on active supervision, ratio of positive interactions. They've looked at what is a minor behavior versus a major behavior. And so some things that are classroom managed versus sent to the office, and trained responses in those. So it's been a process, but definitely we've seen benefit. And then looking ahead, we couldn't end a site council report without also sharing what are the issues of the physical plant. And so I gave you a couple of pictures there just of the boiler system in the original part of the building is from 1959. We have many areas, carpet's it's been on the wish list, I know, for many years. Carpet any site improvements have been delayed because we're hoping to pass a bond, and Wilson would be a part of that bond issue, we know. And so as that is delayed, things just continue to wear out or wear further. So there are many carpeting issues around the building. The lights in the original part are the original from 1959 and are starting, like some of them, when the ballasts wear out, they drip oil on but none of our lights have been updated to LED lights. And our classroom size is the smallest in the district as well, because our building in size is 39,000 and some change square feet as compared to Roosevelt's 59,000 square feet. So they have 50% more classroom, 50% more physical space for the same number of students. Knowing they have the functional special ed program there, but that's because they have the additional space. Our classroom size for second, third, fourth, and fifth grade ranges anywhere from 670 square feet to about 800 square feet. And if you remember the architect's recommendation from Nabholz, it was right at about 900 to 1,000 square feet is the recommended size for elementary classrooms. So we're significantly below that. We also have windows in the original part from 1959 that are concerns. They do not open, or when you open them, they fall in and have to be manhandled to be replaced.
The windows are truly a security and safety issue from the point if we would have to evacuate due to a fire or an intruder. There are some classrooms where an adult cannot even open them, and it's a safety issue as well as an environmental heating, cooling issue during some parts of the year.
I will say, having the custodial shift, when last year about Christmas time, a second semester when all the custodians came to new places, that has helped to have some fresh eyes on some of our we had some classrooms that had some significant heating and cooling issues, and it just helped to have fresh eyes on some of those. It made a difference, and they've kind of problem solved a few of the issues that we had, and it's better, but better still with the 1959 boiler system. So I did want to point that out because our site council was concerned. They wanted you to know those things. But where are we going looking ahead? We are searching for further mentoring programs. We as in things like Tiger Pals. We appreciate those opportunities to reach out to the community. We have a foster grandparent who started this second semester, so his first day was Thursday. So we're excited about that and some of the opportunities that provides. He's got some lunch buddies, and he's going to do some meaningful jobs with some students to help them kind of feel like take some ownership in our building and give them some one-on-one attention with a positive adult. I mentioned
Positive male adult.
Yes. Cross-grade buddies, those families that we're having, the social emotional instruction, searching for further community partnerships. We are working to develop that multi-tiered system of support. That's that intervention process for behavior, just like we do for academics. And then our kindergarten teachers have really sought to look at kindergarten readiness, and we've flipped the lens, not are kindergartners ready for kindergarten, but are we ready for the kindergartners that we have? And so they have actively taken on that challenge to see what we need to tweak to be ready for the kindergartners that we have, which is exciting. So as a K-5 elementary, that has to be, we want their first experience in kindergarten to be positive and to be what they need. So, sorry, that was longer than I expected, but there's the state of Wilson in a nutshell. Any questions or?
I guess I want to thank you for embracing KISA. It's pretty evident that you've really taken that to heart with the things that you're implementing there.
Thank you.
And other than replacing your building, which I've heard come across, what are some other things that the board could do to help support you?
Great question. You know, I think an awareness of, just come see us sometime, and awareness of what goes on is great. I think you have to live it. You know, come for it sometime and see lunch in the cafeteria. I guess just understand the challenges that we face. We feel crowded. We feel, but I think teachers feel supported by the board, and I appreciate that. But
Thanks. Well, having two kids that went through Wilson and two through O'Laughlin, I've been there,
Yeah.
seen it, so.
well, and I think probably since the time that your kids were at Wilson, we've added at least 3 sections
Okay.
of classrooms. So that we have grown from about 340, 350 students to right at 400. So we are packed. But
One thing Mrs. Sheedy mentioned was the specials teams getting to collaborate once a month. That is very crucial, being a traveling personnel in the district. When we look at scheduling for specials and trying to look at what's best for teachers, what's best for kids, just working with the time constraints of every school, the challenges of traveling special staff with having our gym, cafeteria, auditorium combo
cafegimatorium
is really something that, as you say, what can the board support? Just some of those things to look at from the lens that we do every day, whether it's the custodian and the teachers adjusting because we have a speaker like Monty Selby, or having the teachers travel and you know how quick they have to move instead of maybe be able to deal with some things that maybe happen in their classroom that they would like feedback on, or to be able to follow up. It has to be postponed until the next day on occasion. So just some of those challenges that do have to deal with structure, but not always.
well, Matt, I would say it's discouraging to build a master schedule around the availability of your space versus what's best for kids sometimes. We displace PE anytime we have something that has to take precedence, such as and we have one afternoon a week that we can schedule assemblies that doesn't interfere with PE. So that sharing specials teachers is difficult. Sharing a counselor is difficult. I would advocate again for a full-time counselor in every elementary. That would make a huge difference. And I mentioned kindergarten class size earlier. It's frustrating to me to see when I look at district enrollment, and we have 40 slots in approximately 40 slots, 35 to 40 in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and we cannot shift that personnel that we already have that are employed, because geographically we are situated with 4 K-5 schools. John and I have talked about this as well. It would make sense, if we want to do what's best for kids, to structure our schools differently. So I would like you to think about that as you think about the bond. Think about how can we best structure kids to best support student learning, and it may not be K-5 schools. K-5 schools give a family feel, but if we have a K-2 school and a K-3-5 school, or it allows us to do a whole lot more with personnel to best address the needs of students. So, and those are tough decisions to make, and I know they're emotionally charged, but it would help us as we look at what students need. So,
I wonder what we could do for perception. We talk about the cafeteria and everything else, and sometimes I kind of feel like, well, you're preaching to the choir here, I can remember, I think it was John Lance and I, when we were doing the bond last time, we were in one of those classrooms for, 45 minutes maybe, and I know that small classroom, I was there, and I was just like, oh my gosh.
and with maybe 10 people in it.
Sure,
Right.
sure. And in this environment, let's face it, most of us have been in these buildings. We're not, you're not, some of the stuff tonight was tremendous. I couldn't believe all these programs and things going on, but some of the stuff we kind of already know, and you already know, and some of the other district supporters already know, but what could we do to take a video of that and maybe put it on Facebook or, and I don't really know, I'm just perception, how do we get those people who don't understand, who sit at home and say, well, there's just no need, it's been good in 59, it's been good for how many years, it should just be fine.
Right.
But it's not,
Well, it's PR.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah, and unfortunately, we don't really have a PR department, so that's what I'm putting back on you.
Well, I just started a Wilson social media page, like a Wilson page. There's a Wilson Home and School page, but I started a Wilson page, but it's slow.
Well, and
It's not up on the top of my to-do list right
I know the
now.
high school's going through curriculum stuff again tonight too. Maybe that's something that we could add and they could work on as a project or something too, so.
To the social media class.
That's right. Perception and PR.
Yeah. But,
Thank you for everything.
thank you.
Thank you.
Over across, yes, some of the middle school kids over across
Yeah.
the street.
Yeah,
Peer tutor
even that.
project. That's, we didn't even mention that. That's another great resource that we have. And especially with the proximity to Hayes Middle School, we have a significant number of peer tutors that come over every day. And I will say, we don't have interventionists, but our teachers use some of those peer tutors to help conduct intervention. They train them, and that's huge. We wouldn't get nearly as far as we did without the support of the HMS and the students that come every day. Like first and second hour, we have 8 to 10 students that walk over every day. So that's tremendous and much appreciated. Okay. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to school spotlights.
Yeah, there's 4 spotlights I'd like to end up addressing. We have Heartland Community Foundation. They awarded a number of grants to the school district and really want to thank them. We ended up having $3,562 that was given to preschool hearing screening equipment, $3,419 to purchase and implement social emotional learning curriculum for the kindergarten through 5th grade, $2,050 to purchase an early childhood curriculum for the Head Start program, and $1,000 to purchase materials for STEM Pals, which is a program for 5th grade students and residents of assisted living facilities. Karen Nowak was named the Hayes Post December Teacher of the Month, and wish to send congratulations her way. Karen is the communications and leadership teacher at Hayes Middle School. Fellow teacher Cade Scott nominated Karen. Cade was a student teacher under Karen and noted her ability to teach relevant topics and questions to students. Karen has taught a combination of math, science, language arts, and social studies in her 22 years with the school district. Then we have Hope Pantry, Spreads Holiday Cheer. They ended up having tended to 68 families that received boxes full of food and hygiene items. Many of the students and staff from the Learning Center helped package the boxes of supplies for families. Wish to thank ADK, Teacher Sorority, Cornerstone Orthodontics, Arnett Chiropractic, and the Hayes First United Methodist Church for collecting donations to be included in the boxes. And then the Hayes High School Guidon named Pacemaker finalist. The online edition of the Hayes High Guidon was named a Pacemaker finalist by the National Scholastic Press Association, There's 44 high school news sites across the nation receiving nomination for the 2019 school year, and only 2 schools in Kansas received the Pacemaker nomination. Winners will be chosen at the end of April. So congratulations, all the Guidon staff and their sponsor, Bill Gasper.
Next thing is a report of the superintendent.
I wanted to end up having most of the time, we ended up in post-audit, and specifically, there was kind of a significant part that dealt with special education. Chris Hipp is agreeable to end up sharing that information. The only other information I wanted to share before that was just to say we've had a couple inquiries about board elections, and they were asking questions, trying to give information. We finally did end up getting the date. It's actually June 3rd is when that information has to be in for those. And I just wanted it out there for individuals to be aware that if they have interest, they just need to contact the school office. We can give them the information that they need as far as other timeline, but June 3rd is the key date. So as far as the post-audit, Chris, if you would share.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll spend a few minutes talking to you a little bit about legislative post-audit. So special education got the draw last year. The session closed. So legislative post-audit was assigned a task to evaluate special education funding, and they asked 3 different questions around special ed funding. A, what would it cost to fund special education fully? B, how are we distributing the funds right now? Are we doing it the way that we said we're going to do it? And then 3, what are other states doing? So compare our funding mechanism. So before I dive into that, just a quick review of how special education is funded in Kansas. So Kansas uses what's called an excess cost model. So the way that that's calculated is you'll look at expenditures from prior year, and sometime around April, KSDE will estimate, okay, this is what we're going to spend on special education. So looking at funding for this year, April-ish of 2018, they're saying, okay, what are we going to end the year in special education funding? Then you back out what you're going to receive in federal funds for special education, and that becomes your excess cost. Kansas says statutorily we're going to fund, the state will fund 92% of that excess cost. So whatever's left after the federal funds are taken into account. So the other thing to know about special education funding, it's not a resource-based funding like at the district level, in a sense. If we couldn't find a Spanish teacher, we might just have to say, well, we can't offer Spanish this year. You don't get to do that with special education. We have IDEA federal law that says you provide the services and then figure out how to pay for it. So with that IDEA, the feds authorize, they approve 40%. So when the law is passed, at the federal level, they say we're going to fund about 40% of the cost of special education. Every year they go through and they fight that out, and they end up saying, yeah, we can do up to 40%. Historically, they fund between 12 and 16%. So they come in at less than half of what they, so here's the law, we'll give authorization to fund up to 40%, and they actually fund around 12 to 16%. So Kansas says, all right, we're going to fund 92% of your excess cost, whatever the feds don't fund, and they distribute it out 4 different ways. So the first way that they distribute out that money is through what's called Medicaid State Replacement Aid. And really that goes back to around 2008 when funding was in bad shape. They took some federal grant money and they distribute that out, basically just a head count based on the number of kids that receive special education services and are also Medicaid eligible based on a count day. The next thing that the next mechanism for the state aid is through what they call catastrophic aid. So catastrophic aid is you can apply to the state. So if you have students who have really significant needs and the cost to provide services to that student exceed a threshold, it's a percent around the state really. But if you exceed that threshold, then you can apply for catastrophic aid. That comes out of the pot next. So we got about $9 million worth of Medicaid state replacement aid. Then you've got catastrophic aid, of which we haven't received any for a long time. Our co-op specifically. Then out of the pot comes transportation. So the cost to provide transportation to students with disabilities, and also to provide the transportation for like our staff members going from one building to the next to provide the services. Transportation comes out next. The lion's share, whatever's left of the special education funding pot, gets distributed out based on the number of teaching staff. So the number of teachers and then the number of paraeducators. So it's not based on the number of kids. It's based on calculating excess cost and then distributing the lion's share of that money out based on the number of staff. So keep in mind, the state says we're going to, or the feds say we're going to fund up to 40%. They fund between 12 and 16. The state says we'll fund 92%. And so enter legislative post-audit. First question is, how much would it actually cost to fund special education at 92%? And the answer is, according to legislative post-audit, they went around and our co-op was actually one of the 9 that got audited or surveyed to look at this. What they did is, based on sped services around the state, they said it would take about $940 million to $1.2 billion to fund special education at 92% in Kansas. That would be an additional 40 to 360 million on top of what they're putting into special education right now. So what I'm saying is the state doesn't fund 92%. They average between 78 and 81%. So feds say we're going to fund it here, they don't. State says we're going to fund it here, they don't. And so legislative post-audit confirmed that what most of us know, they don't fund special education at 92%. If they did, it would cost, it would amount to, for us locally, that range. The reason they did the range is because they look at, kids' needs really impact how much funding it takes. And so if you look at the low end and you assume low needs for most kids, it would be that additional 40 million. If you look at extreme needs or more significant needs, it would be that 360 million. For us, it would mean if funding was at 92%, we would receive between 8.8 and 10.7 million in state aid for special education. Last year, we received 7.9. So kind of shows you where we're at as far as that excess cost calculation. Now, the other piece of that is legislative post-audit pointed out that we really probably don't have to worry about spending that much more money in special education because you can't find that many staff anyway. Remember, state money, most of it is divvied out based on sped staff. Well, there's vacancies across the state, and it would require, in order to get to that full number, it would require adding a pretty significant number of sped staff around the state. And they said, don't worry about it, you probably won't get there anyway. So we know question one is what would it cost? Well, it would cost a significant more, up to 1.2 billion. But the actual expenditures are probably not going to get there because we can't fill up right now because of teacher shortages. The second question that legislative post-audit asked, or that the legislators asked post-audit to investigate is, are we distributing money the way we say we're going to distribute it? And so, as I talked about earlier, KSDE has to estimate what the final costs are going to be for the year, and then they try to guess at what increases there might be next year. So we get things like surveys saying, how many special ed staff are you going to add this next year or cut? And do you have open positions that you're going to fill? Things like that. So then KSDE takes what they think, or the estimate of what we'll spend, a guess at what we would increase it next year, and then that's how they come up and then subtract out what we received last year in federal funds and what we think we're going to get next year in federal funds and come up with that excess cost calculation. Distributed out then according to. So what legislative post-audit found is there's a lot of guesswork that goes into that, but as far as they can tell, based on the statute, yes, KSDE is estimating and distributing the money the way that statute says it's supposed to happen. They did add a caveat that said if you wanted it to be more exact because there's a lot of estimations, then you should look at it and decide if you want to go off of older numbers or something like that. But in general, yes, KSTP does what statute says. The third piece that they asked is how do other states fund special education? And really what it comes down to, there's a few states that do excess cost model like us, but the lion's share of them do some form of student weighting. And so there's pros and cons to both, and that's kind of what post audit says. There's nothing inherently wrong about any of them, but there's pros and cons with each. One of the things that stands out about our excess cost model is each one of the locals, so the school district, 489 and Ellis and Victoria and La Crosse, the local districts that have to make up for whatever's left, right, after state aid and federal, there's not a financial incentive to identify kids as being disabled. There's also a financial incentive to be efficient when you're providing services based on this excess cost model, because in essence you have skin in the game. They're probably more predictable, and there may be more, maybe more predictable if you go to a student weighting formula. But in essence, when they looked at it, they said there's not enough. Well, actually, they weren't charged with evaluating which is better. They were just charged with what are other models, and so there's a few other models out there. We're one of the group really that chooses excess cost as a model. Some of the recommendations, I guess, then from legislative post audit was basically you could investigate and provide a little more guidance to KSDE on how to calculate excess cost if you didn't want it to be so guessy. But really the biggest takeaway was either fund it at 92% or change the law. And they have the power to do both. But right now, the only negative finding, I guess, on post audit was that you say you're going to fund 92 and you average between 78 and 81%. Couple of takeaways: the alarming shortage in special ed teachers. We've experienced how hard it is to find good folks, but we've been able to find good folks. That's not the case all over the state. The increase to fully fund, to fully staff special education would amount to about a 32% increase in teachers across the state. Remember, there's open spots right now, and we would be looking at adding 32 to fully fund it to get to that 1.2 billion. But it would also result in a reduction of paraeducators, so the non-certified staff. Consistent finding from the post audit was that everyone agrees more teachers, less paras would probably be better for students, but you can't find the teachers. So, and there's a place for both, but it could result in a reduction in paras if the teachers were out there. The other, I guess the final thing that I would add to the conversation is that additional funding to get special education to 92%, the statutory requirement, is a completely separate conversation from school finance and base state aid per pupil. And I think as you may have conversations with your representatives, it would be good to remind them of that, or at least not confuse for the public, to not confuse that issue of we have conversations around the additional money that it takes to fund education in general and base state aid per pupil and the Supreme Court and all of that. This is a separate conversation that they asked to investigate and would be a separate audit. You can't take from one to pay the other because in essence the districts are the ones making up the difference in shortfalls in funding from the Fed and the state. So, questions or comments on legislative post-audit?
You mentioned, you were talking about we when you were talking about the budget numbers. Is that the co-op or just us?
That's a co-op, yep. Which Hayes is about 75% of the co-op.
And the way the co-op does end up having the rest of that funding is a matter of percent. It's based upon the 4 different districts that belong to it end up paying into this that end up making up that difference. So we are pulling money out of really our general fund to end up make that work.
Roughly speaking, it's about 30% of the co-op budget of that 7.0 something budget. About 53% of it is state aid, about 16% is the feds, and the rest comes up to the districts, gets divided up among the districts, comes out of their general fund. So to say, oh, we're going to take money off base state aid and use that to fund SPED at 92%, well, that doesn't make any sense because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. The reverse is true. But we don't need to fund SPED at 92%. We'll just add it in base state aid. Well, then that money comes out of general fund and goes to SPED. So it's
Does anybody else have any more questions for Chris?
Thanks, Chris.
No, but thank you very much for explaining all that.
Yeah.
Very confusing.
Thank you. All right, next thing we have is a financial report from Keith Hall.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Before we get started on the finance report, I want to tell you how excited I am to be at 49. Just as importantly, I also want you to know you have a very knowledgeable and skillful finance team, which includes payroll, HR, and budgeting. They're working hard to support our staff. We have some systems we need to work on, but your employees are sound. I wish the Wilson guys was here. Would they say it's not hard, it just isn't easy yet, but we are working on our systems, and it's going to take a little while. I've asked a lot of our finance team in the last 9 days I've been on campus. They've been very helpful and willing to devote the energy and time for the cause. I meet with coordinators every day, each morning to start the day, and it's been very valuable. My first glance at the district is it's a good adult place, and my experience is if it's a good adult place, it's a good kid place. So I've been really pleased what I've seen, and I really haven't been outside the administration center very much. I hope to get out, but right now it amounts to learning the job. So now I'll get to the finance pages. What I'm sharing with you, it's a little different form than what you're used to. The first page, as you are seeing, is a fund expenditure report that shows the budgeted amounts of each fund on the left. The expenditures are crossed, going to the right, and finally on the right is what's left in the fund and the percentage remaining that's in the last column. For mid-year, you can see, and this is a good time to check because we're at the January point, December, so it's a good time to check funds to see that they're in good shape. You know, we're about halfway through, and that's where some of the funds are. This report is a little different than what you've been looking at. One thing about this one is it comes straight out of our Alio report, and it has saved us some time in the processing. And everybody I've talked to on the second floor anyways about Alio, we need to be leveraging it a little more, and we're going to make an effort to do that. I also have to learn the system. I come from a different system, but they all have the same theme. We will talk. I'm going to mention Alio before I'm done here. Is there any questions about that part of the report? It's pretty generic. It goes by funds, and you have another one that you've used that's by building, and this is by fund. I think this gives you more of a board level 10,000-foot view of the budget. Questions? Okay. All right, the next is a report you've been using. I think it's a good report. It's a capital outlay report, and there's really two columns that I think your attention needs to be drawn to. It's the first two columns. The first one is just the revenue, and then the next layer there below that in expenses, you can see the title and then the first two columns. The first column is what was budgeted, and then the second column is what was spent. And then it projects out over fiscal years, but I think that gives you a nice idea as far as what's being spent out of capital outlay, and then you also have another check in the reports that you get on what's specifically spent each month. So it's another pretty general form, but it's a good one. Questions about capital outlay? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take a minute to talk about Alio, which, if you don't know, Alio is our software that we run our budget, a lot of our HR reports, a lot of things that people use day-to-day around here is part of Alio. Since our department is the high-end users of the software, I've went ahead and took license and set up a meeting with an Alio representative, and I've invited the finance team and anybody else that wants to be part of that to attend another overview of the software. I think we all need kind of a look from a representative that can talk again about all the things that Alio can do. And from there, once we have that one, we're going to schedule that on the 17th of January. And then, once we do that, Mr. Gissina has made a contact for me in Salina, or for us. I'll make a contact with that person, and I hope to get, they're really pleased with Alio. We're not sure we're pleased with it all the time, is the kind of the survey I've done. But we'll get together with those guys, and then we'll be able to do some job-alike things, and I think we can have some growth that way too, kind of aligning with Salina folks. So I'm glad to have that contact in Salina. Couple other things, and I'll let you go. Once I get my feet on the ground, we're going to do the wage study you've been talking about. I hope to have that by March. February, if things just fall in perfect place, but we're going to shoot for March on that wage study. And then finally, we're going to, well, a couple things for finally. We're going to check with Gallagher. We've talked today in our team meeting about setting the dates for insurance enrollment. We're looking at April 29th through May 10th. And there's some things on payroll that has to fall in place before that. But we're going to check with Gallagher because they're managing this thing for us, just to make sure everything works for them too. And my understanding, I don't have a lot of detail, we're going to get moved over to the fiscal year rather than the calendar year. Then finally, well, I would just echo Chris's, Mr. Hipp's words about, as you see the school finance bills start coming through, the discussions start, we do see that there could be some folks wanting to move some money around that maybe, I don't know if the word intended for is right, but they need to keep funding their special ed at the level they are and then start looking at our base state aid. We're all in the same boat for most school districts, is that we're still trying to recover from 2008 and the debacle we've had with the legislature on how they want to fund the general and supplemental general. So as you talk to your legislatures, just reinforce that they need to keep those conversations separate. We get an increase in our base per student state aid, and we should be in pretty good shape. So we need to make sure we keep having those conversations. Any questions for me? Been a great 9 days, guys. Really been good. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda, which includes the board meeting minutes from December 17th, 2018, with an amendment that Mike Walker presented to Sarah after the board packet was delivered. It's on the Nabholz contract motion. The minutes just didn't include the number of ayes and nays, and she's updated that. The approval of bills in the amount of $2,491,534.13. Personnel transactions, the approval of Capers authorized signers, and the approval of authorized signers for Astor Bank and Equity Bank signature cards.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Oborny. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to old business, we have the 2017-2018 audit report. Has everybody had time to review after the presentation last time? Are there any questions?
I do have a couple. It always concerns me when things come up in the audit report, especially when they're only looking at very broad areas and not everything. And one of the things that always concerns me is we fix the problem, and that's great, but then if we have changing in staff, superintendents, board members, what do we have to memorialize that we're going to continue doing that? And to me, that's where the policy manuals come in, and I don't know that we historically have done that, and it just seems that we would, if we don't put something in writing or say this is how it's supposed to be done, it makes it really difficult to hold anybody accountable later on, or just to remember, hey, we learned from this once already, we don't need to do it again.
And you're right, some of it is policy that needs changed. Some of it's procedure and just how we, our practice of how we do some of the things. And those are a few things that was changed in the last year or two, was just a practice that we've changed that. Sometimes you can get into a practice and think nothing's wrong with it and you're just always doing it that way. But you're right, there needs to be something that identifies it, and one of the benefits that does exist is we have had, I can't say how long though, we have had the same individuals who are working with us in that audit process that does help, because they do have some of that history of working with us too, of checking it. But yeah, we do need to keep track of it in several different ways.
But how do we implement that? That's my concern, is that, I mean, a lot of the stuff we say, yeah, we do need to do that, but how does it get from that discussion to actually having a policy in either an administrator handbook? I don't know that it's really a board policy area, but.
Right. Well, some of it has been changed in our procedure, in our handbook. I mean, there have been some changes. The point you're making is that if anything is listed, we need to somehow have it documented and identified, I think is what is being said.
Or if we already have it documented and identified, we need to make sure we're taking the appropriate actions to coach up the person that did it wrong, or, you know, potentially something worse than that if it needs to be. I mean, one of the problems that you run into often in these situations is if you don't have it documented, you are exposed in a lot of areas.
So have we addressed then all the three issues that were in that report then? Have those all three been addressed?
We have. And actually, a part of that's already been talked, you know, with Keith of him being familiar with it as well. But yes, I believe those issues have been addressed. We've worked on a couple items that were addressed actually 2 years ago, and it's a matter that it's been not just a matter of 1 year, but really in practice of getting things set. And it's really, I'd say, taking more of 2 years of getting it in place. But I feel very confident that we are doing that, and confident too in talking one-on-one meetings with representatives from Adams, Brown, Barron, and Ball that we are doing that.
And so those three we've addressed, and we've either done policies, or if we don't have something in place, we're doing something to address those then. Thank you.
Anyone else have any more questions? Not, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the audit report as presented.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Oborny. Is there any further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Next item is the 2019-2020 Hayes High School Curriculum Guide revisions.
I really did not get any questions or information since the last meeting on this, so I don't know if there would be any questions. It's nice that Marty is here if there's questions, but I didn't have anything added to share with the board on it.
Any further questions? Ask for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the 2019-2020 Hayes High School Curriculum Guide revisions.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Bickle, second by Board Member Adams. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Next item is the sale of Washington property.
It was, I mean, it's very good that Mr. Park had shared and had questions at the front end of the meeting, and some of those probably will be answered, you know, in our discussion at this particular time. From the last meeting to this meeting, we have actually two offers that have come to us. There's two entities that have interest in that property, one that is local as well. I am just sharing, I know you have the information and it's open conversation, but I think it does make it an interesting conversation when you consider there's several things that really must be addressed in your minds. It's not just a matter, or let me change that. It doesn't have to be just a matter of the dollar amount, okay? For the Board of Education, the different considerations is how the property is going to be used, okay? It can be a matter of timeline. It can be a matter of basically, I'm trying to think on how they mix together, you know, the different issues there. I do want to point out one of the items in repetition. It does seem like this is being rushed, but there is reason for that. It can be, and it will be explained again, but it has to do with one particular entity and their time frame of being able to utilize that property in which way they want to, and it requires an application that is definitely has to be submitted in February. So the timeline really makes it tight by that in that particular way. We have talked about the possibility of that property even 12 months ago when we started the conversation about the possibility of Oak Park property and moving from that site, the Washington site. We talked about at that particular time what might we do with that property. You know, we had conversations as far as do we really think that we would be able to sell the property with the building on it, and had some doubt of that, had some belief that the land had value, but was questioning whether the land had value with that building on it. And so, you know, we had some of those discussions months ago in this process. So to be in a position right now with two different offers, it becomes a bit interesting to have open conversation as to what we might want to do with it. The fact is, we don't have to do anything with it. But I do know that we did talk about, again, months ago, not wanting to have a piece of property, a building, that would be vacant for a very long time. That would be alarming. Now, that would be our decision. What's a very long time? Is that 6 months, a year, 3 years? But as far as that's where we are at this particular time. Could there be action on this tonight? Yes. And actually, there's probably two entities that would maybe prefer to have action tonight as far as timeline. So I would open it up to questions you have. We do have individuals here that can answer questions as well.
I just wanted to point out that you're under financial considerations. The one is listed at $180,000. It's actually $200,000.
Well, it was $200,000 with the $20,000.
With the earnest money is the
Yeah, it
20.
wasn't on top of it. It's together, the $180,000 and the $20,000 together is $200,000. It wasn't on top of it.
So it's $200,000 total.
Total, that's right.
That's what I have in the contract.
It's $200,000 total. Right.
I don't know. I don't have my computer open.
And we do have that $20,000 check. That was actually given to us just for us to hold at this point.
So maybe, I can't remember the gentleman's name from Overland Group, so maybe
Matt.
I'll need, Matt, maybe I'll need him to clarify. But on the two offers we have, last time we were talking, it was, we're going for the, or you're going to go for the, is it historic? Is that what it is first?
Yeah, Matt Gillum, Overland Property Group. It's a combination. It's kind of a group financing. Since I was standing here last time, it is pretty rushed, but we did quite a few, so we probably did about 2 months worth of due diligence in about 2 weeks. So historical consultants, architects, engineers, both structural, civil, et cetera. So we know what we're getting ourselves into. We did have discussions before the government shut down with some folks historically, and the school has been profiled before, but it's not been filed to be a historic place. They do believe that it does qualify, so that reassured me of a few things, and that's why we did end up presenting the offer that we did.
Okay. Now, if we accepted this, and they came back and said, yep, denied, I remember there was a plan B that you were discussing
Sure.
then as well?
Yeah, so our intent is obviously to preserve the school, and there's a reason for that, which is there are a few different financing mechanisms that I can get on top of the low-income housing tax credits, and so that kind of helps reduce the burden that I'm asking the state for on the low-income housing tax credits. So if we're not able to preserve the school, which again I do believe at this time we will, then we would look at it as a possible tear down. But again, at this point in time, I would pretty much take financing mechanisms off the table if I wasn't able to preserve it, and I'm hearing right now that I would be able to.
And did we have a timeline when we were, I thought maybe some of this was being decided because you needed a timeline as far as
Sure.
to get stuff approved,
Yep.
and then we would know, you would know an answer.
Yeah, so we have to turn this into Kansas Housing Resources Corporation for low-income housing tax credits the first week in February. They take that in, and the packet that I'm putting together is everything from market studies to building condition, physical reports, architectural designs, etc. And they at that point would look through everything, and we would hope to hear back in, I would say June 1st is conservative, and at that point in time we also would be working through the historical processes, trying to get them moved along as well. So by the end of the summer, we really believe that we would have we're full green lit. We're going to be moving forward now. We're going to start the process with our investors, banks, et cetera, on closing. So we've kind of got a year contract to make all of that happen. If I hear that I'm going to be unsuccessful in receiving that financing at that point in time, I would be having discussions with the state to figure out if they're not approving me because of the location or the school or so on and so forth. We at that point in time would come back before you and say, we weren't successful, here's the reasons they're telling us why, and at that point either cancel the contract or come up with a change of plan.
So worst case scenario, option 1 doesn't work, option 2 doesn't work, and then we're still stuck with our property.
Yep, if I can't come up with a financing mechanism, I will not buy the property, and that's something that is also a benefit, because you don't want me to hold something that I could say, you know what, for me, I'll throw it on a 5% loan and I'll stick it there until I can make it work. That may be 10 years from now. You see a lot of people do that with buildings like this, and I just warn you that becomes kind of a contagious disease in areas.
Matt, could you repeat from the last meeting, though? I understand Luke's question as far as the possibilities, but your track record
Yep.
was what again? You had how many projects?
Well, last year we received all the funding on all of the 9%, which is the low-income housing tax credits, the most competitive portion of this. The historic credits, again, I've heard positive things. Those are not hard to get. They're not highly competitive like the low-income housing tax credits are. If we receive the low-income housing tax credits, what I can tell you is I'm going to figure out a way to do this deal because I have a good chunk of the money that I need to do it with. you don't walk away from low-income housing tax credits, and you have a limited window to start that process in. So to answer your question, we are probably, I'd say, the best in the state and easily one of the best in the Midwest at receiving allocations and proceeding with them. We've never received an allocation and walked away from it, nor have we ever had a property go bad. So, our reputation is what allows me to continue to keep doing this. So, we're starting construction on our property in Salina here in about the next 2 weeks, and just had conversations on my drive out here today with U.S. Bank, who's buying those tax credits. So, we're really good at getting the financing lined up for these types of things.
But at the end of the day, if I understand right, though, it's still basically a year out, and we have no money down, no nothing. It's basically just says we want it, we hope it's going to turn out, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, no guarantees.
You're right. I have a lot of risk going on my side. So, end of the day, when I put this in for federal tax credits, I'm spending about $50,000 to do that. So, I'm not going to come to you guys and say, man, I'm taking this huge risk, and for me to take this big risk, and obviously my purchase price is significantly different than the other, and part of that is I know that I've got a little bit longer lead time. There's a little bit more risk to mine. But at the end of the day, if I am unsuccessful, I always turn over all of our studies, etc., to whoever the seller is. So if I'm unsuccessful at the end of the day, I'll turn over everything that I've spent money on. And so you're not walking away with nothing, but yeah, neither of us are walking away with what we wanted in the first place. But again, that's why we've compensated it with the purchase price.
Thank you.
A timeline, just to make sure that's, I'm throwing out the February because I remember you saying
Yep.
that. But as far as action that's needed for you to continue on this,
I don't like putting guns to people's heads, but if I don't have approval tonight, I
Right.
can't move forward.
Right.
I've got to get a resolution support from the city of Hayes, and I've already had conversations with the city manager and his staff, and everybody understands that if I do enter into an agreement with you guys, we kind of have some things that have to get put in place quickly. I've got a lot of third-party studies that I've got to spend money on and do before this February deadline. We've got our consultants teed up and ready to go, but I obviously can't do any of that until I have assurances that we have a formal contract, because it's the most important thing to the state. So it's a unfortunate thing, but it's kind of we've got to hurry up, and then obviously it goes in, and then we all get to wait for a while to kind of hear what happens.
That February deadline, is that a deadline that only happens once a year?
Yep. They used to do 2 rounds in the state of Kansas, and they stopped doing that about 5 years ago and went to a singular round.
And then your building, will it be tax exempt from like our city and county?
Nope, we still pay sales tax on all the materials. There's actually a lot of studies out there, if you guys want to look it up. Section 42 program of the IRS code is what we're using for a financing mechanism, as enacted in '86 under the Tax Reform Act and the Reagan administration. And so we're not exempt from property tax. We do pay a property tax, although, as you guys know, this is in a downtown revitalization district, and so really anybody who develops that school will utilize the downtown revitalization district. But we do pay property tax, we pay sales tax on materials, et cetera.
So for 10 years, it will be exempt from anything other than its current value
Right.
for state, county, and school district taxes.
It'll be exempt from,
And whatever it's valued at today is what it's locked at. So if it increases in value 10 times, they don't pay the tax on that for 10 years.
Is that before or after a sale, though?
It's actually 65% is exempt on residential.
I think it's 95.
95
I believe
commercial,
so.
65 on residential.
So it's 95 exempt?
That what he said?
95%.
I didn't hear what you said. Is that, so it's 95%
95%
exempt?
on a commercial, 65% on a residential.
I think this
My
is considered or residential, though.
This would be
It's a residential
I would think,
dwelling,
yeah.
right.
So it'd be 65%.
So for comparison to the other offer, I'm just trying to look at that letter that they sent. The only contingency regarding this project is the ability to acquire building permits to remodel the property for this purpose. So similar to this, though, I mean, if we went with that option, we're still not necessarily guaranteeing the property sold tonight. There's still some contingency type things that we're still going to run here, it looks like till May 1st.
There'd be still some contingencies, right?
We've been down this road with this same group before. I can't remember what year it was, but it was on the 33rd Street property. We entered into an agreement. It didn't go through because the city voted against it.
For the option B.
And then we ended up selling it. I can't remember if that was more money. I think it was. I think it was. So, because we then listed it by, I think we did it by.
That was one we took sealed bids and ended up getting more money. And keep in mind, as a board, under Kansas statutes, you have the authority to dispose of any property of the school district, whether it's real or personal, in any manner that you feel is in the best interest of the school district. So you don't have to take the highest bid or, you know, whatever factors you want to utilize you think is best for the school district, then you can dispose of property.
Is there anyone here from this group? Is there anyone here from the other group tonight?
After last meeting, I did get a couple messages from people, and they were telling me how impressed they were with the Overland property. Someone messaged me and said that they're pretty legit, and then I had another person, their words, and then another person who I think they work for the city, I can't remember, just said how good of an idea they think this would be. So I've only been receiving good from people. And one thing that worries me about selling the building is if we sell it and we sell it to someone who doesn't end up keeping up the building, then it becomes that we're the school board that sold it to that company who now that building's all run down. And it sounds like Overland Group will keep our image good.
Yeah, actually, I can speak to that real quick. So with this program, and because of how many eyes are on us, both from the state, this is a program that's audited by the IRS yearly, so you can imagine dealing with them. Our investors, so on these properties out here at Stone Post, they have a fund and a bunch of investors that also audit the property yearly, and that is not just on making sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing with our residents, but also physically. Stone Post itself has substantial financial resources set in place in escrow that we're not allowed to touch, and those are in case the building falls in disrepair. If we're not doing our job, we can be replaced as the owner and developer, believe it or not, and the financial institution can force this next developer to fix them because the money is escrowed in a reserve account that I cannot touch unless I apply for that. So if all the siding fell off that building tomorrow, the money is already in an escrow account to fix that, and we have to continue to increase those reserve accounts every single year the property's in service. So one thing with this program is we have to, by law, keep that property up at a high level to keep doing what we're doing. So.
Thanks. Yeah. I guess one concern that I heard from someone asking is being able to preserve the property, or at least the facade of the property that we've had.
Sure. So, sure, I can answer that actually. Again, you know, I had actually pretty in-depth discussions with our historical consultants and actually with some of the folks both at the state and federal level. And one thing that we talked about as we really did a deep dive on what we could at that property and the architectural history of the property is the front of that building, as you see it from Main, has to stay in that condition. Windows cannot be added in any areas. The front of the building has to look that way. So I would probably have to go in and historically restore the current windows that are in there, but that look of the front of the building would have to always stay that way because of the historical significance. If somebody doesn't utilize a historical process like me, they would be able to do something there because it is not on the historical registry right now, so it is not technically protected. So I'll just tell you that. The back of the school, obviously, you guys have done some additions over certain periods of time, and the glass block windows are not obviously ideal on the north side of the building, but talking with the historical consultants and the contacts, really those parts of the building will, we believe, able to overcome some kind of tough parts, but that front can stay as it is, and we'll be able to get the number of units in there that I need to make this financial work. So to answer your question, the front of that building will always look that way if I proceed with my process that I'm talking about.
Okay, because I know that was a concern I've had.
Sure, sure.
And the 365 days does seem like a long time for us to tie up a property when we are taking on
Sure.
a construction project, and be nice to offset some of what we have to do there with that. Why 365? Is that just how long your thing's going to take, or where's that?
You know, I think it's important to be realistic with these things and the process themselves. For instance, in Salina, we received, so it's a yearly process, we received word that we were confirmed with funding at the Lee buildings in Salina last year. And same thing throughout the summer, we also received historical and really received all the financing mechanisms we needed. And here, just today, we've talked to and agreed to the investor, the bank, and we've been working with them for about 4 months. But you've got to get this cleared from a process, which is if you're using these types of funds, they have to be cleared through. And so you wouldn't believe all the red tape. That's probably pretty much the simplest thing I can tell you. And it's not this is a red tape that you can't get through, but it's the finding the maze to get through it. And so with any investor, they kind of all have their nuances that, they may care about some easements that you have across the back of the property that I need to get removed, so on and so forth. So really it's more of the practices and procedures that each investor requires. And so it's just such a complicated financing mechanism that 365 days I'm going to be hustling to get done in, but we believe we can get it done in. So it's if anybody wants to come volunteer to beat their head against the wall with this financing mechanism, I'll tell you, come on in. But that's kind of the issues with it.
And so, just to clarify for me, is that because you invest in historic development, the property itself has value, even if the building were removed?
Not as much, but I believe the property does have value. If you were to remove that building, then just like our buildings across the street, you would have to build out of the floodplain. We all know that you haven't had water issues there, and you've not had water inside that building. So, from my perspective, I believe that I can get the financing mechanisms in place to do that. Again, if you were to demolish the school, the cost to develop that, I believe, gets substantially higher, and I can probably pay, I'd say, substantially less than what I've offered. I believe that school has actual significant value to me. Some people may not, but I believe it does.
Okay. And that's an important aspect of
Sure.
Members of the community is said, you can't get rid of that building, tear it down. But if it has to go, and
So what's it going to
Sure,
cost to tear it
sure.
down too? What's it going to cost to tear it down?
well, that's kind of my thought too.
And, we've, as I showed you guys in the slides last time I was here, we did end up tearing down a school in Salina, the old Hawthorne School on the north end of 9th Street. And that school was sold by the district, and 6 years after the district sold it, it had 6 failed businesses in it in those 6 years, and then it sat vacant the last 2 years. And we came in and told everyone, hey, look, it is not savable, and we told them that from day one. And we still had some outcry, and I think in this case you would probably see the same. People don't like to see things change, and they went to elementary school there and holds some value to them in their hearts. So I would say if somebody's going to tear the school down, be ready, because we've experienced that in a lot of communities. Tearing down schools is not as simple as it sounds.
Just in fairness to hearing, John, maybe since nobody's here for turnkey property, I guess clarify for me, they're just buying the land, but who's responsible for I take it the building would have to be taken down? and that-
No.
It says
no.
convert the building.
No, they want the building as well. They would like very much to purchase the building and the land, and they are looking at it to make it into apartments for college students. That was their intention. So, but it's to save the building as well. And the contingency that Luke had pointed out earlier had to do with having building or codes. I'm sorry, no, I can't think of.
Says the ability to acquire building permits to remodel the property for this
The
purpose.
permits, that's right. So, and now the advantage there, I mean, actually Matt has spoke on that a couple times, is you can end up making you're probably not as pressed for tonight to make an action. You could probably put that off. You put that off, and next month or the month after, there may still be an offer now, and it'd be the $200,000. I mean, and basically it's perhaps you're not waiting a full year, you know, and the contingency may be, if you're taking risk, maybe there's a little bit less risk there. But we did talk on the, I guess I never did ask Matt, you ended up saying that you end up having that money that is there that has to take care of that facility. If the siding fell off, you know, that'd be taken
Reserves.
care of. Is that based upon the 10 years? I mean, after the 10 years, is that still the case, or is it
No,
within
this
that
is
10?
this is part of our financing mechanism, so that's a 30-year deal.
That's a 30 years,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sarah, we have another meeting this month, correct?
Yes, the 28th.
I'm sorry, and when did you say, I know you said the sooner the better, but when did you say, I mean, it's February and sometime where you have?
February, but I've got to pull the trigger on studies, architectural engineering, so on and so forth. So the packet, when it goes in the state, is about that big, and it's pretty much everything you can think of. In addition to that, I have to get a resolution support from the city of Hayes. That can be turned in by March 1st, but for me to be able to get everything in and in front of them, we've got a lot of work to do before that February deadline. So we're going to be pressed for time to get it in right now. Our team's ready to go. We'll be able to get it in, but you know, if it's a couple weeks from now, I won't be able to turn it in. I have to pull my offer. So.
Could I make one comment? I'm not working, I'm Doug Williams with Grow Hayes, and I was contacted by the other party. I'm not working with them, but I did discuss this with them. They told me what their intent was. They intend, as John said, use it for student housing. They intend to leave the structure as it is if they can get by the ordinances that may present some challenges to do that, as Matt will face as well. But in any case, it's turnkey properties. They have a number of properties around town, do a good job, as do Overland Park Group. I think both would be good stewards of the property. Both intend to use it as it exists in terms of not tearing down the building. And so while they're not represented tonight, that is their intent. And but clearly their offer is considerably less. And I think Overland Park Group their past experience here speaks for itself. They have nice projects, and one would be for affordable housing, one would be for student housing. That's probably the primary difference in the two proposals, aside from $300,000. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Did the other group ask for a meeting time? No.
I appreciate the fact as far as you answering the questions, the other one on there, and I mean, I think it could definitely be something great for the community as well as a way for us to offload the building. I mean, my biggest issue is I hate being pushed up against a wall like this, making a decision like this at the last minute where it has to be done and we don't have another option.
And I guess making that distinction, this is affordable housing.
Correct.
And what's a market study indicating how much we need that in Hayes?
So we have we have about 80 people on a wait list at Stone Post right now that cannot get in there because we're full. So, you know, when we do market studies are great, but real world examples, in my opinion, are better. So when we actually applied for a property that was, I mentioned last time, is kind of an old trailer park just east of our current property, that market study came back saying that we needed well over 100 new places for people to live within this side of the low-income demographic. And at that point in time, we had roughly 40 to 50 people on a waiting list. So since then, we've seen the demand grow. I think part of that is kind of our marketing outreach has gotten a little better as well. We really don't market our property and haven't, but just kind of a new company policy. We want people to know that we're there. And so I think we've really seen just how much the demand and the need is in this community. So, you know, since we opened up Stone Post, all 3 phases, from the beginning, we've always known the demand is here and again, stayed full there. And so we've never had or seen any dip in the need and desire for that type of housing in the community. So.
And affordable, is that like a single family?
It's
how many people in each unit?
So this is from 30% to 60% AMI, which is the area median income. So a family of 4 can't make more than 60% of the area median income. And so there are some cost adjusters for a family of 1 or 2 versus a family of 4. But, you know, these are typically working sector, you know, your grocery checkers, your gas station attendants, maybe a first-year teacher, first-year firefighter. The program has actually changed very recently to allow up to 80% AMI, but we still have to average 60% of the AMI at max. So again, this is really working class people in the community that otherwise would struggle to find nice places to live and not spend more than 30% of their gross income.
Okay.
Based on where those are located, how many of those are college students?
We can't allow college students in this type of housing. It's not.
So the
it's not
existing
allowed.
ones and waiting list, none of them.
Unless you're a
students.
non-traditional student, then you know that does work. But yeah, we don't have any college students living there that are just simply college students. So we have very intensive background and other checks that we have to run. So if you're renting a normal apartment in the city of Hayes or really anywhere, you could go through those credit checks, employment checks, and within 12 hours have the keys or less. With this, it is at a minimum of 3 to 6 day turnaround because of the qualifications that we have to run through and the employment verifications, et cetera. We also require and do not allow anyone with a felony to live in our properties either, and those are all requirements that are national with this program.
Matt, when you ended up saying, when we were talking about a year, 365 days, when does that time start ticking?
So I believe the contract says from
January 31st, 2020 is
that what it is?
on or before.
So it'd start upon a decision tonight. I mean, or...
I believe that's correct, yes.
And we'd be using that building for the next 5-6 months the way it is.
Right.
So the building would be really vacant for 6 months.
Sure.
Not a year.
Right. And just to give you some comfort, you know, we've got some language in there that allows me to do some studies and other. I put in there, we're buying it as is. The studies that I'm doing are not, I'm checking to make sure your boilers are working. The studies that I'm doing are, we're looking for the historical significance. We're making sure there's no lead that I need to abate. But those aren't contingencies of closing. They're so that I can plan financially in my pro forma, not so that I can back out of a sale. If we receive financing, we close on these deals. So our intrusiveness at this process is we'll probably have our teams through there, you know, one time, and that would be it. So we wouldn't be intrusive in how often we would be in there or anything.
I'm sorry, I know you probably have said this and you probably said it the last time, but I wasn't
no
here.
Problem.
So we would conduct business in our school as
Sure.
normal for
Yep.
the remainder of the school year. And you would know this summer if things are moving in a positive direction? So say they weren't, we could begin the next school year for 2019 in the fall if it was not looking favorable?
You know, as I kind of said last time, I see this as a partnership. We're going to have to work together here to get what we want. And so when I know something, I'll be back here and be able to tell you guys and be talking with the state and telling them, hey, I really need to let the school board know if you're not going to move forward with me, why, so that I can come back here and say, hey, look, they said, you know, they love the deal and they're going to approve it, but X, Y, Z. And so this is a pretty transparent process in my mind, and how we operate with sellers. And Galen knows we've operated with a lot of different transactions in town and across the country, and that's the best way I've found to do business is be very open and honest with people. And so when I know something, you guys will know something. And so if plans change or things change and you know, we don't feel that we have an opportunity to ever get this deal, I'll come to you and say, hey, look, I don't think it's ever going to happen. And so I'll cancel the contract far in advance. But while that contract's in place, you guys can utilize it in however fashion you see fit. You know, we won't have any use for it until we close.
Even clear up to the closing date then?
Correct.
So
Absolutely.
we could have a whole nother fall semester down there?
Absolutely.
Why are you doing so much work so quickly? I mean, why did you even come to us with this?
Sure.
When we know, when you're describing it, that you did 2 months' work in 2 weeks,
Sure.
you know what?
Sure. You know, we've always had our eye on Hayes, and obviously you've seen me try to make some things around town work. Over by the hospital, we've had a site. Galen's probably sitting back there thinking, you know, they've looked at everything. And the state's always come back to us, and they just don't like the location, but they love this location. And so they've always encouraged us to go out, and they've said, you know, try to find additional homes around there that maybe need to be bulldozed and try to find more site in that area. And we've been unsuccessful until now. So I'm pushing this pretty heavily and quickly because we believe this is a great opportunity for us, for Hayes. The demand is clearly here. We really have our pulse, or we feel like we have our pulse on what's going on around the state and communities that are in need. So, you know, the city of Garden City is expanding rapidly, and we've built 96 units there fairly quickly. Salina, with the downtown movement and all the money they're putting in downtown, that's why we pursued the Lee building. So we believe timing is everything, and in this case, you know, the timing just fits right to where we haven't done a phase of Stone Post in, you know, north of 5 or 6 years now, and so we believe it's the right time to add more, and the demand is only growing. So, yeah, we've done a lot of work quickly, but it's because we believe the opportunity is you know, perfect kind of timing wise. So.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
I'll just state that even though I do have a few concerns about the timeline, being about a year, but I understand now that we've discussed that, it's not really not a year, it's more like 6 months. And I wish the down payment, if you will, was a little more than $5,000, but I'll go out and speak in favor of the project. I think you've done a great job presenting the information that you have, and from what I understand, you have a good track record, so I don't have those concerns. So just for the rest of the board members to know that if we voted on this, I'd vote in favor of it. Not that anyone cares. Just saying what I'm doing.
No, thank you for sharing. I mean, we even heard tonight with the Wilson, State of the Wilson report, that a third of those families are on free or reduced lunch. So it just seems natural to think that doing low-income housing would serve our student population well.
Yeah.
No more.
And since everyone's speaking, because I'm somewhat like Mike, I am concerned with the 5,000 does seem a little light. The time frame is of coming to us in 365 days is a little concerning. But on the other side is that I do like preserving the integrity of the historical, and I understand it does, and the affordable housing for the community. Because of some of the tours we've taken, that's always come up with an issue. And as a person who hires people, I know that's been a problem even for me as I've hired people in finding a place to stay. And I think there's still dorm space available, so I'm not as worried about students. Go with that.
I realize that there's concerns about time and it feeling rushed and the timeline on the contract, but it is listed as old business, and they did do their diligence income last time and present, so I'm asking the board to make a motion in favor, against, or something entirely different, so at least he has an answer for this evening.
I'll go ahead and make the motion, if I can see. Do we have it up there, Susanna? No. There, I'll make the motion to approve the sale of the Washington property located at 305 Main Street to OPG Land Development LLC for the purchase price of $500,000 and $5,000 earnest money.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Young. Open it up for any additional discussion at this point. Y'all are quiet. Seeing none, I will call for a vote, and on this one, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes 5-2. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Greg, I apologize. Motion passes 5-1. Abstaining is a negative, right? Yes. Okay. 5-2.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. We'll keep you posted as we move quickly towards the February date, and be happy to share anything we find in the meantime with historical consultants and other. But we're excited. We think this is going to be something really good for the community. So thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Please do.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Before we move on to new business, I'm going to ask for a little 5-minute recess for bathroom. So we'll come back at 8:33.
You don't have to say. sounds glad I'm glad we're doing this site council meetings.
It's hard to hear it that way. You're kind of going, dang. You know, if they just pay what they say they're going to pay, the school, I mean, regular education, would have what they want.
I know this. Pretty quiet. Maybe it was more for public consumption.
Did Lance just go?
Everybody watching this.
Lance?
Is Hayes. So if 1.7 could stay for other reasons.
I don't have to sell it. But I was after 10 minutes.
Yeah, I know. I was really.
So
what can you do? You can't really do much.
40.
Should I just go ahead and get started? I think we're going to go ahead and get started back up again. We're missing just Lance. I'm assuming he'll be back. All right. Getting back to new business now, we'll have a technology update with Scott Summers, Director of Technology. Maybe if I wouldn't have given a recess, you'd be really fast, right?
I'll still try to keep it pretty quick here. So, at the direction of the board, last year when we did the high school device, the question was brought up, Chromebooks, and at that time, had we done a study into it? So, fast forward a year, we're at the point now of looking at the replacement device for Hayes Middle School. So, it afforded us the opportunity to go ahead and do that study to look at the feasibility of the Chromebook. Figure out which direction. So the study purpose, we wanted to explore the instructional prospects of replacing not only the Hayes Middle School, but also structuring this to where it will help us this time next year when we're looking at 3 to 5. We want to identify the current processes and applications in use, but also identify current and future instructional needs with that. Management of the device and how, how we go about managing it, but then also how that plays into existing infrastructure as well. Timeline review, I think we presented the timeline last fall to the board, so this is just kind of a visit back to what the dates were, adding in there the October, November, and December, and the meeting and the tech committee. But just, like I said, kind of a visit back at that timeline. I think you're all familiar with that. We did send out a survey to the HMS staff. That survey was to figure out in a device what is the most, well, maybe not what the most utilized, but just the features and functions, and to get a real good picture of when you're looking at the device, what we would like it to do. Some of those are, indicative of any device you pick: internet connectivity, the integration with our LMS, Canvas, word processing. Some of the big pieces that we picked out of that list, device monitoring, that was a big piece, just giving the teachers, they have the ability right now to monitor the iPads as far as, I think it's every 2 to 3 seconds it takes a screenshot and will show them what the student's doing. It will also report back what app they're in, how much time in that period the student did spend in a particular app, just to try to give them that information. So they've got that piece now, and that's really become key to helping. Especially when you've got a classroom full of students, and if you can't be directly over their shoulder looking at them and see what they're doing. PDF annotation, that's also a big one. You talk about going paperless or trying to reduce paper in the classroom. You have to substitute that somewhere. So having the worksheets as PDFs on the device, giving them the ability to fill in those worksheets, take notes, all of that was a big part. And then device management. That at the classroom level is important. It's probably a little more important on the IT side when it comes to apps and things like that. You know, if we can't manage the device, or if it's a headache to manage it, if it requires more time on our side, you know, that's no good to us. But the rest of it, the freehand drawing functions, slide presentations, access, I mean, those were all pretty, what they're accomplishing with the device now. Implementation costs, so those big three I talked about, the device monitoring, we did pick out 3 companies and evaluated those. We settled in on Dyno. We were able to secure the free pilot from them. It was probably one of the most recommended ones when we talked to other districts that do Chromebooks as far as that ability to monitor. They do charge, it's $7 per student per year with the activation fee of the $1,500. And that would be a per building cost. So PDF annotation or the free hand drawing tools, once again we picked the top 3 companies. 2 of the tools we tried did not meet what they are currently doing. Kami was about the closest we could get, and so we secured that pilot at a reduced rate, but the annual cost is estimated at $3,000 per building. Device management, that Google, you don't have to buy the device management, but in order for the Chromebook to be managed by us, it does require a $25 one-time fee, and you'll normally, sometimes that's included in the price of the Chromebook. Some companies that has to be an additional cost on top. If you ask for it, they are not just automatically going to include it. So. On the study, the teacher feedback, we've got Nathan Perdue and Gina Johnson here, and I'm going to let them talk a little bit about what they've seen at the elementary and the middle school level with that.
Good evening. When we began the implementation of the Chromebooks in my classroom specifically, my goal was to see could the Chromebook instantaneously replace the iPad as the working device. So what I did is I took 2 of my classes that were in the 8th grade that were statistically similar in terms of their testing scores as a class, allowed one to continue to use the iPad and the other to use the Chromebooks. Now, it's not necessarily scientific, but it was the best that I could operate with. The thing that I noticed by and large was the inability of the Chromebook to be an organizer, and especially we were handicapped with the fact that the Chromebook stayed in my classroom for the entire day and were just used for 42-minute or 84-minute periods respectively. But what happens when we want to annotate a PDF is on the iPad, you take it from Canvas, the learning management system, to Notability, which is an organization tool and an annotation tool in itself. When that assignment is completed, then the student can take that straight back from Notability to Canvas, just a one-step thing to be able to turn in, which for middle schoolers who sometimes have difficulties with attention, that's a big plus. On the Chromebooks, what we notice is that you go from Canvas, have to go through a middleman to save the file to Google Drive, and then go over to Kami, which is the PDF annotation system, for the kid to actually be able to edit the assignment. Then when that assignment is complete, it goes from Kami, has to export back to Google Drive, and then back over to the learning management system. So a very time-consuming process there. A couple of the PDF annotation tools that Scott suggested that we tried Microsoft OneNote, because that's something that the high school has already used. The Chromebook just didn't seem to work very well by using that system. I have a couple of students that have visual impairments, so being able to blow up the screen to increase the text size was really, really important for me, and the Chromebook really failed at being able to do that. It would jump the PDF back up to the top of the page, so even if you're working on a problem that's maybe halfway down the page, you zoom in and it goes right back up to the upper left-hand corner, which would be derailing for a middle schooler trying to work on that device. The other one just didn't work for some. I can't remember off the top of my head which one. It was Doc Hub. It just seemed to be, Kami seemed to be the best choice. Really mixed reviews on the 7th grade. I let the students use both their iPad and the Chromebook, and just to compare the difference. I think that a lot of the kids were like, wow, this is a new device and it's cool, but then when actually working with some of the difficulties of the Chromebook, I incessantly heard the phrase, can I just use my iPad for this? So there are some really good things about the Chromebook. I love the fact that it has USB ports so that we can use some of the Vernier lab tools that we have for the science classrooms. That's really, really great. But for the day-to-day kind of use on that, I think that the students and the faculty at HMS prefer the iPad for their use.
I'm Gina Johnson. I'm a 5th grade teacher. Not only did I do the Chromebook, I also used the Google Suite of programs with my class. They use Chromebooks about 75% of the time. 25% they're still on the iPads. For computer lab, they still go with their iPads because that's what the computer lab tech is familiar with. I would say definitely the keyboard has been probably the best part of this. I've also had them kind of compare annotating, writing on the Chromebook versus writing on the iPad, and they are much more comfortable given they've used them a lot more with Notability. On the Chromebook, it kind of refreshes and goes away and comes back and jumps back to the top from the bottom, so it wasn't quite as user-friendly. From my standpoint with Google Classroom, that works pretty well. It's not quite as, I guess, long-range planning, in my opinion, as with Canvas, where I could create an entire module and have all that set. Google Classroom kind of looks more like kind of a list, kind of like Facebook or things like that. So to find something, they'd have to scroll way to the bottom, kind of that organization tool. As far as the programs that the district has purchased for us, from iExcel to Reflex, iStation, some of those things, those all were interchangeable. They worked fine on the Chromebook. Once they got used to using them with the keyboard versus just the touch screen. Things that we are missing, that rear-facing camera was kind of awkward for them to have to try to take a picture. They kind of quit, or I would take the pictures and get them sent to them so they could share them via Seesaw or use them in any of the programs that we were using.
Thanks. Move on here. We did have student study feedback. That was out of the middle school. Nathan, I don't know if you want to speak a little more to that. Okay.
I did a couple of surveys with my students, both the 8th grade and the 7th grade. I'm sorry that didn't make it onto the information for you to be able to see. Pretty kind of dividing line in half, preference of the iPad or the Chromebook. Take that as you would under consideration from a group of 12 to 13 to 14-year-olds. But What I asked is the device comparable? About half said yes, half said no. I asked, what are your favorite things about the Chromebook as compared to the iPad? And by and large, the students preferred the Chromebook for its keyboard as opposed to the iPad. If doing something that didn't include freeform typing, the students preferred to use their iPad, but the Chromebook was preferred for essay-style answers. When I asked what device, hypothetically, if they could choose to use one next year, I gave answers that were that was the iPad, the Chromebook, an iPad maybe with an added keyboard or a different device altogether. And survey results were pretty indicative of maybe an iPad with a keyboard would be a hypothetical place to go. Having the infrastructure of the iPad functionality that the teachers and the students are already familiar with the added bonus of a keyboard. Again, just some survey results from the students.
Hey, Scott, just a quick question to add on what he had mentioned about the touch. Were the Chromebooks not touchscreen?
They were.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious.
Students preferred the functionality of the iPad's touchscreen to the Chromebooks. Essentially, they would have to turn the device so that the screen was sitting on the table to be able to use the touch.
Thank you.
So some of the conclusions we reached in the study, although there were hurdles that we encountered, several of them could be overcome, but it would be at a large annual cost. The lack of the world-facing camera, depending on model of Chromebook, you could pick up the rear-facing camera.
Can I ask, because I thought when we talked about these with the Dell models we got at the high school, they made that exact same model in a Chromebook that was about $200 less, and it had all the same features, which one of theirs was a dual-facing camera. Did we not get that?
We got one of, so the model you're talking about, the 3189, we did pick up one of those to test the 2-in-1 functionality of the Chromebook, but the ones for the study were just the clamshell models. I know Dell has got more, coming down the pipe as far as that rear-facing camera with a Chromebook model, that you may be able to pick that up in a clamshell that'll have one on top. Let's see here. PDF annotation. Like I said, that came back to that. That's a big one. Yearly cost at $3,000 a building. Device monitoring. There again, the $7 per student. If you're looking at just the middle school next year, we're estimating that around that $4,700 mark, plus the $1,500 activation fee. Screen mirroring. That unfortunately was one spot that we just weren't able to overcome yet. We tried 2 Chromecasts. Right now with the iPads, we use the Apple TV. We tried to get the Chromecast going, but there is something about the Chromecast and our network that do not play nice with each other. We're at a point, of sitting down with network engineers, somebody trying to trace that through, but for the study, it was going to be another large cost on top of the study. So at this time, we weren't able to overcome it, but if need be, that's something we can come back around and look at. As you've heard, during the study, the keyboard was identified as the instructional need, but the keyboard on the Chromebook being a big benefit over the touchscreen typing of the iPad. As far as battery life, network connectivity, things like that, we really could not find any discernible difference. Obviously, the Chromebook's battery was probably a little bit better, but you're pitting a brand new Chromebook against a 4-year-old iPad. So I did want to include in there, Marie had gone back and looked our investment in professional learning hours, the 323 hours, that's been, those are hours dedicated solely to the iPad, the apps, the curriculum there. So those hours would not be transferable to another device. We'd have to reinvest in that training with another device as well. That's kind of where we came through with the study. Got any questions, I will answer them the best I can, or we've got some resources here.
I just have a couple. You said we talked to other school districts. Who did we talk to?
I attend a monthly tech meeting. It's area, Ellis, I'm thinking up north, Plainville, Salina, or El Saline attends. I've reached back out to, I think, down to Hutch, that area, talked to them. I mean, just a different smattering. Some of it has to do through listservs. The Kansas Tech Directors listserv, kind of putting questions out there and seeing who gets back. So.
And that tech group you're involved with, there's how many schools in it?
The one through Smoky Hill, given month, I think we average 12 to 15, depending on the turnout, because it's across 2 locations.
How many of those are using Chromebooks versus iPads?
I don't know right off the top of my head. I can get that for you though.
And did we talk to any professionals, Fort Hays or anybody else about, concerns and issues, those things that you guys addressed that were problematic? Did we talk to anybody about options?
I believe Marie reached out. I don't right know off the top of my head on that one.
Do you know by chance, Scott, did we visit with TMP at all? Because I know they use it as well.
I didn't make contact with them. I had talked to Holy Family just briefly about their experience with them. I know we'd had some teachers that had talked to or been at TMP, kind of got their feeling on it.
And I guess, because I think you're always going to get, and I think there were a couple of them, if I remember right, in the previous one that were not fans or whatever the case may be. I guess I was just more curious from the lines of some of the different things they were talking about as far as whether it's the Canvas or the other stuff, what some of those other districts that are using the Chromebooks actually, what are they utilizing for their platform? Are they using Google Classrooms? Is there another one they're using? Are some of them using, do they have something they're using for, being, I know there's lots of programs out there that you can utilize to monitor what's on their screen and stuff like that integrate in with different options, but obviously realizing part of us, we already have an infrastructure in place on some of the stuff, so I'm sure we were somewhat trying to utilize what we had. I guess I'm just
trying to get it to work. We kind of really did come back to that point that the Chromebook really wanted to live in its realm, and that's the Google universe.
And that was the only reason I was curious, just, on some of those other districts that have gone all in on that, I guess a good way to put it, it would be just like us, being on, the Chrome platform and wanting to move to the Windows platform. You're going to run into a lot of the same type of things. So I'm just curious what some of those other districts, either what number one, what they've done to address that, or costs involved and stuff like that. Because as I said, I realize there are costs involved in some of this stuff, but are there other apps or other options that could be used for that? I got to believe there are other districts out there doing PDF annotation out there on Chromebooks. Knowing the issues we ran into here, surely they're not all putting up with those issues and just saying, well, that's just the way it is. They just scroll to the top. Are there other apps that could be used? And again, those are just a couple of things, but I guess that's my issue. If there are people out there that have had that, there's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel. And at the end of the day, maybe Chromebooks are not the answer for the entire middle school or the entire grade school, but if there are areas we could use them and we could save some money and still have the best of both worlds, or have, I know like the keyboards or some of that stuff were brought up. I guess that's the reason I'm asking.
Yes.
What's the plan going forward? Is this just the end of it?
I guess that, honestly, we could probably continue to run it. I think that's gonna probably come based off of the device recommendation. where the middle school goes, but I guess I could see continue running it, because I mean, at the elementary level, because we'll be looking at that next year. So I don't.
Like I said, there may be a number of issues. I just figured
And
there's got to be a lot.
We're continuing to use them in my classroom,
Right.
just to try to overcome some of
Oh, no, and that's fine, and I appreciate that. I just, like I said, I guess I just would think that we would be much better ahead if there were some of these other ones we could reach out to, and, you know, even, you know, if you're the one doing some of these, maybe put you in contact with some of those as well, and say, hey, you know, this is what we're trying to do. What if you guys run into? How are you getting around this hurdle or this hurdle? And, you know, at the end of the day, they may come back and say, hey, this is just something we've had to learn to put up with. Having said that, there could be some of these other ones say, oh, well, we found this, but this is what we use and it's great. I mean, some of it, maybe there's cost involved, some of it, maybe there's not. I guess we don't know until we ask, so.
I have a question of the board, because I think, the question I think for us is I've got more I could go into and questions I could ask and things I could bring up, but if the board is satisfied with what we have, then I'm not going to bring any of that up. If there's 4 people that are happy going forward with what we have, I'm not going to bring it up, but if there are, I think there's a number of things that we haven't looked at, but I guess I'm curious where the rest of you guys are at.
I know I was kind of confused. I wasn't sure if the board had decided to do Chromebooks because we're wanting to switch to Google, or if it was mostly just because of the device. So I was trying to understand where in the report did it say that Google would be a good switch.
I don't think you get the choice. Chromebooks are kind of proprietary, aren't they? I mean, if we decided we're going to put in 700 of these Chromebooks, I mean, there is a lot of Google stuff you're going to have to switch to use. Am I correct?
Yeah, like I said.
Much like Windows and Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Everything likes to live within its own realm.
Yeah, or Apple.
And when you try to force it outside of that, you run into issues.
So yes, to answer your question, once we've already went one direction, you would be looking at a switch of software.
And I think we get to the point where eventually, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, Scott, I mean, more and more things are becoming platform agnostic. And, you know, as you stated, I think, you know, you ran into several different pieces of software that seem to work just fine. And I think as more of these vendors go to HTML5, which most are on the way, at the end of the day, it really shouldn't matter what platform you're on for a lot of that type of stuff. Now, I'm not saying everything, but there's a lot of those apps out there that are becoming to the point where whether you're on an iPad, a Windows box, a Linux box, or whatever it is, you should be able to use them across the board, you know.
Yes.
I'd like to share with you guys, when I went to the conference, they had a whole session on the Chromebook, and the superintendent of Bonner Springs spoke, and they had some good things that they liked about it is it was easy for them to distribute assignments through it. They ended up having 4,000 less copies the first year because they switched over to the Google editing side of everything. They said with the Microsoft 360 that they were using before was very cumbersome, so being able to share documents easier was very nice. Even for their administration meetings, they ended up getting rid of their agenda setting meetings because it was all in the shared doc. It saved them time in that way. They said that they still ended up having to have MacBook computer labs for their journalism programs, their video design, and some other one that they mentioned. And also they still had a PC lab for CAD. They had said that they ended up having to hire extra staff, a technology integrationist. I think they hired a couple of them. So they had to hire extra people to help implement the switch of everything. They use Skyward. Do you know what that is? Skyward. They said that it didn't link up well with their Skyward. That was one of the things that they didn't like for it. They said that if they do it, it would be a lot of professional development and they bring in speakers to help with the transition and everything with their technology. They mentioned that they bought it at $241 and they did the Acer Google Chromebook. They also had that $25 software protection management software for it. But they invited anyone who wanted to know more, ask them questions. Bonner Springs seems like they would be a good district to reach out to.
Did they say anything on how long they had the devices? Was it 2 years, 5 years?
For what? Had them already?
Well, how long were they using them for before they had to replace them? I'm just curious if it came up.
I wrote down that they have a 5-year replacement plan, but I don't know if they had the Google.
I know Waukegan, their district over there, I know they've had it for a minimum of probably 4 years over there. And I don't know if that's somebody we've talked to or not, but I do know them. And I think Plainville may be another one that actually has them, but I know for sure Waukegan does.
They also said the work orders were less. I guess that's more maintenance.
Tickets.
Well, I guess from my opinion, from addressing, I think, Greg's question, I do appreciate the information we've gotten from you guys and the work you've done so far, but I do think there are some things we need to pursue.
Okay.
Like talking to TMP or some other people we know that use these systems that maybe they can provide some advice on how to do some workarounds. And again, if the workarounds are too much work, then I say we don't go for it. But if the workarounds actually work, then that might be an option. John, this is a new business item. So are we going to be voting on or authorizing something next time, or this is just a discussion?
No, this was just an update.
Okay.
We were with hopes that part of this was trying to be done so there would be a more timely presentation on recommendation of what device to use. That's not what this meeting is.
I got you.
That would
I just want to
be.
make sure I'm tracking. Yeah.
And I think Scott was going to say he's been waiting for quotes.
Yeah.
He's not getting quotes yet on different devices, so
Okay.
it may not even be the 28th of this month. It may have to be the first meeting in February before we have quotes. Or,
I don't know if you have enough,
presentation.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I don't know if you have enough direction from us. Maybe we need to be more clear on what we would like you to do, but I think we do need some more information, as some of the other board members have mentioned.
That's the direction to share and something as far as that can be done. So the other part of the presentation was the laptops and how they're doing at the high school. You know, that's the other part of this presentation, is an update on that.
And Scott, I guess one of the other questions, I was just trying to look through some of the stuff you broke down with fees and stuff like that. You know, where we have the device monitoring software requires a yearly cost and things like that. Is any of this taking into account as far as, and I guess that would be something maybe we ask some of the other schools, you know, are they, in some of those cases, are they not using the Office 365 stuff and using, you know, the Google apps and things like that instead? Are they using something, you know, different as far as for the monitoring and things like that? Are they doing any of that through the Google Classrooms or any of the Google, I know you, through the $25 fee, I know you get a lot of the management stuff, but I didn't know for sure if is some of that included in there with those fees. You know, I guess that would be something I'd be curious too, is, you know, what, so we can compare apples to apples, you know, if we're looking at, you know, TMP, what do they pay per student per year or whatever to go through and have all this stuff with the Google stuff versus what we pay per student per year on the Windows side or vice versa. I guess it would just be interesting to see where those fall.
I think my words would echo Lance. My concern would be the hidden costs. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of little things here. I know and the other concern would always be make sure we're comparing apples to apples. You know, I think Greg brought up the camera, you know, and you know, I know you said we were looking at the clamshell model. If that's the model we're considering, great. If we were considering the 2-in-1, I think is what you called it, you know, I just want to make sure we're always doing that. I know when we looked at the Chromebooks for the Dells at that point in time, I want to say the Dells came in around $396 a computer, and the Chromebook equivalent was $320, $325 or something like that, $330. And you know, and at the end of the day, for the amount of students we have at the high school, we were talking a difference of $56,000. So my concern would be is, okay, we're going to have this and this, and maybe this software, maybe this. I mean, we need to get some hard numbers, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I mean, and then retraining everyone on this newer system, we could spend $60,000, $70,000. I mean, we could spend more money trying to save money, and that would be my concern. So
I think we need to be careful about throwing around numbers like that, because we could spend $2 million, you know, if we want to throw it. But what would be helpful would be to go out and say, here's what it costs to get an Apple, and here's what the cost is for every piece of software we use in the district currently, including Microsoft. Because if you go to Google, you don't need Microsoft. And so what if, if we stick with an Apple device, here's everything we use. And there's some of that looks like it's already done. I mean, that survey we got was helpful, but we got like 3 or 4 responses on each was it. But they list those things. And so then you would do a cost benefit analysis between the two. And one of those would be is if we think we need training, how much do we think, based on our discussions with other districts, how much would this company estimate that cost to be? Would Fort Hays do it for free? Because I think that was part of it that they... You got a poll? Well, I don't know if they will. They had a grant at one point. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But, what of those resources are out there? And, we've been down this road before. We've switched platforms before.
I would agree. I'd want some sort of direct comparison.
But if you look at the device monitoring, it's $7. The 1,500 activation fees $2.22. If you divide it out amongst 675 students, so you've got $9.22. That's an extra cost. If there's nothing else that'll do it, I'd like to see, if that's the only option, great. If there's 2 other options, what are the costs? Is there a freeware version? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But those would be the things to look at. I guarantee you that if you're going to ask a student that's used for 3 years an iPad and tell them to go use a Chromebook, they're no different than adults. They're going to say, I like to use the one I'm used to.
It's going to be great to them, for sure.
But when they leave our sheltered little world here and go out into the real world, they're going to get whatever their employer has. And so if they know more than one device, they're better off in the world.
So I guess my question for you is, does this give you some direction?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So
Thanks for everything you guys have done so far on that, Scott.
Yes. You're welcome. So if no more questions on the Chromebook, we'll kick over to the high school and give you an update there. So I'm going to bring Jared Wickham up here. Jared joined our team September, yeah, early this fall. And we've had him out at the high school, so he's kind of been running front line with the devices out there. So, kind of just to start you back at where we were in the fall with the rollout, laptops were handed out the 15th, 16th. Checkout was accomplished with 2 of the tech staff. There was a good number of high school staff on hand for that if they were on plan period. Marty helped coordinate that to hand out label chargers, hand out pins. On the styluses this year, in the past we've had with Surface it had an active stylus with it. This year we opted to go with the Papermate ink pens that have the soft tip stylus on the end of them. So far, I think, Jared, you've handed out
2 extras.
Yeah, so those tend to be looking pretty well for us right now. I don't think they check off what every teacher would like them to do as far as the fine point in the writing, but for the majority it's working. After being assigned, they went back to their GPS. They logged into laptops. Office was already pre-installed this year, so that was a big hurdle we've had to jump in the past, but with it being pre-installed this year, it I think eased a lot of the process. During that time, the students were also instructed on how to use OneDrive for their storage needs. The devices themselves are only 64 gigs, so utilizing that 1 terabyte of storage they get on OneDrive, is a benefit to them because they get more storage in the machine, but also if the machine has to come in for repair, swap them out, everything's backed up and it's good to go right there. Students that weren't in GPS received their device on the 17th, and we did have over a 90% turnout rate by that Friday, so it went very well. In the repair process, I'm going to let Jared talk you through that, just because, like I said, he's been running the front line of that this fall.
Okay. So it'll be pretty quick because it's been, I think, went really well so far with the new devices. So we've had 45 repairs completed through Dell. They have the 3-year accidental damage warranty, so we've only had maybe 2 machines that'll have fees on them. That's things that you'll never get around, broken screens, things like that that were intentional damage. So everything else has been able to be covered under accidental damage. We've had a couple of machines that have been dropped, fell off a desk, cracked a screen. We've been able to get them repaired right away. So just a quick roll up on the 45. Oh, you got it on there? Yeah. Hey, look at that. So just a couple of the things we've seen so far. 45's pretty good out of the number of machines that we have out there, and out of the 800 plus machines that are being used right now. We've had 18 bad motherboards. They had a couple of different issues. Again, 18 is not a whole lot out of 800, so you're going to find that in any machine anywhere. So we've had a couple of them that wouldn't power on. That's actually a pretty common issue. Others were just they would stop charging. So we've had 1 broken left hinge, 7 broken right hinges, 1 broken bottom case, 7 broken power jacks, 2 of them that have had screen issues, whether it be discoloration or a part of a screen not working, 1 broken keyboard, 1 broken power button, and 1 of the broken screens was actually, there was 7 broken screens? Yeah. 1 of them was user damage. Just to break a couple of those down, the hinges could be a couple of different things we've been looking at. We've actually had talked to some Dell engineers. Generally, it's due to the hinges were just stiff because it's a 2-in-1 machine. You're flipping it over. So you're doing that a lot. When you turn it to tablet mode, you fold that machine over on itself. We have 1 left and 7 right hinges because when anybody grabs their machine, I would bet most of you, when you pick it up, if you're right-handed, you probably grab it in the upper right-hand corner and pull that up. And that actually will tweak a hinge on a machine. And I think with these being new, I think it's putting some undue stress on them. I actually think we'll see that go down. As these hinges start to wear in a little bit and they fold a little easier, we won't see that. So 1 broken bottom case, it was just some cracked plastic. The screen issues are 2 out of 800 that had a screen issue. A broken button board. And the power jacks, we thought maybe was an issue. It's a little hard to tell, but did a student trip over their power cord at home and damage that? Did it fall off the bed while it was plugged in? Did the dog trip over it? There's not really any way of kind of telling that unless a student comes up and says, hey, I tripped over my power cord and I broke my power jack out. So I think all in all, that's gone actually pretty good. There's all of the students that I've talked to absolutely love that machine over what they've had. They tend to think it's great. The Latitudes have always been a good line of Dell. They have a great track record. So I really have not. I'm sure Mr. Straub has heard good things about the machine for the most part.
You just share. Every winter we pick them up over Christmas breaks and do a quick review through database that we set up, and Jerry, if you want to share that.
Yeah. So we never really know what to expect going into that when we turn them in over Christmas break. That gives us a good chance to look the machines over, find any damage. We have students that maybe they have a cracked screen and they don't want to say anything. That gives us a chance to find that and get it repaired, get it fixed, go over any issues like that. Last year, I think we had between 80 and 90 machines. Was it? But I wasn't there for that turn-in, so
in the
I know it was a lot.
fall of 2017, we had 213 repairs in the same time frame as this.
As what we've had so far. But I believe on fall break on turn-in, they had close to 80 repairs. Machines turned in. We had 7 turned in over fall break that needed repairs. So that's a pretty good jump. So
I do want to share with you, we also did a staff survey just to pull in how they see the device working out there. 90% of the staff surveyed did agree that it was meeting the instructional needs. If you look down through the list here, there is obviously a big point that jumps out, and that's the 41% that disagree with network connectivity. To give you an idea, so we asked them to rate this over the whole first semester. We did have quite the issue with network connectivity out there. Even with it being a new device, they like to hang on, especially if the kid's moving down the hallway. If they don't move far enough down the hallway, it's still like to hang on to the old classroom. Was part of the issue. The other part of the issue, we were overrunning that network. When you looked at the clients on there, it was through the roof. We actually went in November, I think early November, and dumped anything on the network that had Samsung, iPhone, anything attached to it. And we blocked the device. And talking with staff, that we saw a pretty immediate turnaround in reliability and connectivity there. So that 41%, we asked them to rate the whole semester. And so that's where that kind of sticks out. But towards the end, and Mr. Straub can talk to it, he is asked that at a faculty meeting, and there's multiple staff that have commented that it has gotten better since that process. So everything else, numbers kind of speak for it up there. So on the next step celebrations, just do want to point out that we're averaging 11 repairs per month, which for almost 850 machines running around, that's pretty good. We did implement those restrictions on network access, which resulted in significantly improved network connectivity. We do plan to go and heat map that building. Heat mapping, what that is us walking the building, surveying the wireless, and either finding out we have either too much coverage in an area or not enough, and trying to dial back those access points to deal with when they do move up and down the hallway. We would like to transition from, right now we're all Dell warranty support. We have that in place. It's on-site warranty. Normally, you schedule them in. I think within a week, we normally have somebody on site replacing parts. The parts are overnighted, or sometimes 2 days.
In
But
western Kansas,
yeah,
they're as fast as the shipping companies will get it.
yeah.
But that's usually from me putting in the work order, diagnosing the problem, putting in the work order, the technician getting the parts, then scheduling the service, and then coming out to do the repair.
So that's been going pretty well time-wise, but we'd like to transition some of that to in-house repairs to even step that timeline up a little more. The comprehensive image, we are looking to build that this spring. A big part of that would be having Office pre-installed, because we saw what a tremendous help that was this fall in the rollout. So that's where we're at. I guess you have any questions on that device or how things are going?
On the warranty support that you're talking about bringing in, is that something to where we would basically have people that are Dell authorized then, and we would be paid from Dell to do our own repairs?
Correct.
Or?
That's where I'd want to get.
Gotcha.
I've got, back on the Chromebook thing, not a question, but I want to have a motion so we are clear what we want, because I think we've gone down this road before on talking amongst ourselves about what we want, and then we go back and we don't have it. So I'm going to make a motion that we have staff provide us a list of all software applications, et cetera, that are being used on the iPads and that we anticipate we'll be using on the Chromebooks, including the cost of those. This would also include all accessories, cases, pens, keyboards, anything that would be in any way associated with the device that we're looking at purchasing for next year. And that we have that at least 1 week prior to it being placed on an agenda, and that this not be presented to us in a situation where we must act now, that we have appropriate time to consider this, with the understanding that the board may ask for additional information such that it might push it a week or two, or not a week, a meeting or two down the road. That's my motion.
Sarah, did you get all that?
No. I think, can I read back what I
break it
have
up?
to make
Yes.
sure I have the gist? Schwartz motion for a list of all software used on the iPads and all of the software needed for their Chromebooks, including all keyboards, pens, and other devices, including their cost to be provided to the board to review at a future meeting.
I also included apps or anything similar. And when you're ready, I'll tell you what else I have.
Okay.
Ask that we receive it at least a week prior to it being on it, the first agenda to be considered, and that it be placed on the agenda with sufficient time for us to consider it and ask additional questions before we must act on it.
Scott, you said the next time we're going to be replacing something is going to be the middle school?
Correct. This,
And is that going to be for the fall?
so we'd be looking this spring. We'll make the replacement
decision.
going into the summer. So the new device will roll next fall at the middle school.
Okay.
Yep.
One other thing I forgot, I also want to make sure that we've reached out to other districts utilizing the Chromebooks and any professionals that, such as Fort Hays, that, on the implementation and selection of software and apps. That's my motion. On that anymore.
In a nutshell. Is there a second to Greg's motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Board Member Schwartz, seconded by Board Member Bickle. Is there any additional discussion? Not, I'll call for the vote.
No, you're fine. It's Scott, I was going to say, I mean, I think you guys are on the right track. I think I'd just like to see, I guess, just some of the other stuff, like I said, rather than reinventing the wheel, so.
No, fair enough.
What was the timeline you said in the motion? You said at least a couple weeks. Is that what it was?
Week
Just a
before.
week prior to it being put on our agenda, so we
Agenda.
have a week to look at it.
When's
before we-
it being put on our?
So that's not
It's-
the week before the board meeting, but the week before that even. So 2 weeks prior to a board meeting, am I understanding that right?
So
Well,
Agenda?
I'm going to bring that up later, but.
February
Before
5th.
the board meeting.
February 5th would be that date.
So, I mean, I don't know if it's the next board meeting, or I just, a week before it's going to be on the agenda, whatever that is.
Whichever board meeting that is.
Okay.
Did you guys already make a list of all the programs you use?
I think there's some of them they started doing in that one.
Yeah.
I thought you guys did
some
when we were originally talking about it,
Mhm.
doing the study.
But, I mean, so there's a list of programs, but then it's more, I guess, what that program's doing. Because you could say we use Notability, but really that's PDF annotation and organization. So it kind of, I guess, drifted from program to what the purpose of that program is.
Right.
So you're asking for just current programs, just a list of them?
Well, I want to know what we're using,
Mhm.
so when we look at that, we know what we're comparing it to. Kind of what Luke said, we're comparing apples to apples, and so we have
So like a list that says Notability,
software
but
slash
then
apps.
also what, I guess, genre that app would fall into.
Or what the equivalent would be on the
Yeah.
other side, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just two columns.
Yep.
That is one thing I did ask Bonner Springs if they did when they were doing their presentation, what they did about that, and they did that ahead of time, made a list of things, and there were still things that didn't transition over, but they said most of it does.
As part of your, I forgot, as part of your motion to continue some of the research, looking at, no, I don't want to make it, I heard that you were encouraging them to also continue doing research and calling people,
He said,
Well,
yeah.
we just
He
continue
just
to
said,
reach out to other
Yeah.
districts.
other districts,
But I think
professionals.
Yeah,
some of
maybe-
that.
Maybe Bonner Springs would be a good place to call.
Yes, but I think some of that's going to fall hand in hand. If they say try this app, well, we're definitely
Yeah.
only going to give it a shot.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
I'm abstaining.
Okay.
Yeah, nay, you can just nay me.
Okay.
It was a lot to put in.
All right. So the motion passes 5-2. All right. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
If you need the details, check with Sarah.
I will.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, George.
All right. Next is summer school fees and driver's education fees.
It's nice that Bruce Rupp is here. If there's
Yeah, thanks, Bruce, for being here for 3 hours.
if there are questions, but I wanted to point out, here's an example of our auditor who had pointed out a number that seemed a bit odd, and that was the amount of money that existed in our driver's ed. And we had been doing better year after year, and the total was getting to a point where it was looking like we were making money in that particular. So that was pointed out, questioned, and in talking to Bruce, we have a very strong program. I mean, we can count on 200 students every summer, and because of that, in the conversation, it was a matter of, okay, what can we do with that with our fees that we end up charging for this, and still on a gradual process decline that number, but still keep it solid over several years here. So we had a discussion as far as anywhere from $30 to $50 that we could cut off of our fees, and feel comfortable that $50 being taken off of the fees for driver's ed is reasonable, and without any kind of concern that we'll be in trouble in the next couple of years.
You just addressed that last year when Sarah and I visited. The first thing we did was, when she approached me with what our balance had gotten up to, I asked Mr. Thiston, also Tracy, about the permission to go ahead and add days. The state minimum for driver's ed is 7 days. Legally, we have to have a 7-day program. And the last time we dropped ours, we dropped it down to 8. I'd requested a 10-day program, but because of the cost, Mr. Straub felt it was best, so we dropped down to 8. So last year, because our balance had gotten so high, because we were profiting so much, because our enrollment had increased so much for various reasons, Tracy and Mr. Thistle gave me permission to change our program from an 8-day program to a 10-day program, which we started last summer. I felt like with an 8-day program, we were putting out not a great product, to be honest. We were relying more on parents to finish our job, and I wasn't comfortable with that. And there were some students that we were passing, to be real honest, I felt like we're borderline. We hate the parents to invest $250 and the kids to invest 8 days and not be rewarded, yet we don't sleep very well at night wondering, man, is this kid going to crash and burn somewhere? And so with that in mind, we talked to Mr. Thiston and Tracy, and we agreed that we would offer a 10-day program. I think our salaries went up around $10,000 to accomplish that last year. But I felt like we put out a way better product. I think kids having 10 days versus only 8 benefited those students a lot. And we had very few kids that we didn't feel good about, and those kids didn't pass. I think our enrollment is very steady now because our class sizes are larger. I also feel like because the state reimbursement is better, and there were 2 private schools that were shut down in Kansas about 3 years ago, that has caused some concern from parents, and so there are less and less parents sending kids to private schools in Salina or Wichita. I've been a very strong advocate for public driver's education. To me, it should be mandated, it should be required, because the private schools do it in 3 days, and I think it's ridiculous. I think that our kids need to take driver's ed, whether it's at TMP or Hayes High. It needs to be in Hayes, not in Wichita or not in Salina. My balance currently is a little bit north of $30,000. If we drop it $50, it's going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $10,000 to drop that. But last year I still profited $11,000. Even spending, I bought all new brakes this past year, bought another new sign to have a backup sign, so all the expenses I'm going to have, I spent last year. So my brakes generally last around 7 to 10 years, so those are the most expensive item I have to buy. So I feel real comfortable with dropping, with the school fees being as much as they are and the parents out of pocket for other things being very high. I feel like giving them a break and cutting this down to $200 would benefit them a lot and still let us make a profit. That's reasonable. Questions, anybody?
Do you feel then, as far as, I like the fact of dropping it, do you feel then as far as from a longevity standpoint, I mean, i.e. we're not going to be talking again in 3 years saying, well, now we're losing money, now we need to add $50 back to the fee?
No, I feel real comfortable with $50 right now. I'm having a contingency of $31,000 roughly in my budget. I feel like if we lose a couple $1,000s for a few years, we'll still have plenty of backup money.
No, there is a factor though, Lance, if the state provides, if they change how much money they put towards it, that could make a difference. Because they have, over the last few years, that's kind of gone down and then back up a little bit, so.
I guess that's part of the only reason I ask, because it's easy to take away. It's never much fun to try to jump the fees back up.
So the other good thing about it is because our enrollment's continuing to climb, and this 8th grade class this year will be the largest we've had in a long time, so our enrollment this summer will be very large. I think that as long as our enrollment stays consistent, because we're not adding instructional, it bumps up my classroom sizes. We don't add classroom teachers, it just bumps up the classroom sizes and more driving hours so we're good there.
How many instructional days did you have before we changed this? And that was been
Years ago, Greg, it used to be 9 weeks, then it was cut down to like 4 weeks, then it was 2 weeks.
Did
then
you
it
do
was,
weeks? I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't all driving weeks though, were they?
No, it used to be, when I started, and granted that was 26 years ago, we had to have 240 hours of classroom time and 40 hours behind the wheel per kid. And so it's pretty much a,
Changed a wee bit.
So 40 hours behind the wheel, you said?
yeah.
And so you've got, how much now?
Now with our 10-day program, we're driving 7 days instead of 5. So the 2 days that we had were all driving days.
But how much did they drive an hour?
They drive 2-hour sessions with 3 kids per car.
So it'd be 14 hours
Yes.
versus 40?
Yep.
Have you thought about adding more hours? I mean, there's some difference in the law now too, because back then you didn't have to drive it all with your parents, and now you have to have 50 hours and then 100 hours. If I think that's what the numbers are. I could be off on those, but
Yeah.
I think you're at 50, it's like.
The hard part about adding more,
Nighttime hours and, yeah.
yeah, we have to have 10 hours, 10 of the 50 have to be at night. The hard time adding more hours now with the classrooms being so full is that right now we don't finish until, our last session is July 8th through the 19th. So it's pretty getting close to school starting back up already. You know, so if we add more days, right now it's 2 weeks, and I don't want to give excuses, but I think that the kids' schedules are so packed right now because of all the other things they do in the summer, trying to get them to. I think the reason we were starting to lose kids were because they could do it in 3 days in Salina versus 2 weeks here or 3 weeks here, and it's just tough for the parents to squeeze that into their busy schedules, the kids' schedules. And so I think the 2 weeks we have now is doing a pretty adequate job.
so that would be about a $10,000 loss annually?
Yep. The last year we would have profited about $11,000, so we'd still be, making enough money to cover in case we have expenses arise. The only unforeseen expenses we have would be deductibles on insurance claims if we have accidents for car coverage.
And we revisit these fees every year, don't we?
Yes, we do.
That's what we revisit the fees every year, I think.
And this is just, we're going to act on it down the road?
It's new business,
Yeah.
so yeah, we're talking about next month, or next board meeting, or the meeting after, but
Yeah, the advantage of knowing early is that when I have my enrollment meeting, I believe right now it's scheduled for March 4th. It's nice for the parents to know how much money they have to put away, and it's easier for my letterhead and stuff when I put out letters to parents, let them know in advance that, okay, the deposit's $100, your remaining balance is $100, as opposed to the board hasn't decided yet.
I just decide on 50 instead of 25. There is that out year cost of fuel, whatever it may have. We don't know where that's going to go
Correct.
in a while. But 50 seems like a big jump. I just wonder if 25 might have been a more reasonable middle ground.
I'm open to that. That was the number I felt as far as the high end. 25 might be safer.
Yeah, because I take it you have to pay fuel
Yep.
out of that.
Yep.
That's
one of the reasons we continue to profit is the fuel's continued to stay low because of oil prices. So it's been a while since we've had the expensive fuel in the summertime like we used to.
Yeah, we're just not sure where that
Sure.
can go. Artificially low right now.
Yep.
So to clarify, it's currently 250. You want to drop it to 200. That's the idea, right?
If you're more comfortable with 25.
Personally, I'm a little more comfortable.
Okay.
Kind of hedging that maybe more of like a 4 to 5 year window.
Okay.
And, yeah, that's just that just has a better feel and seems like it gives us a little more room to maneuver. And I think, I support drivers ed heavily. I had an uncle in Ohio who ran probably one of the best drivers ed programs in the state of Ohio without a question for his whole career. So.
And I just want to follow up on those fees, because the way it reads in here is that our current fee for in district's $200. That's the way it.
Yeah, it is.
Our out of district's $250, and then it says recommend to reduce the fee by $50. But
Yeah.
we're saying from $250 to $200. What's out of district then? $300.
Out of district's been 300.
Okay.
I just typed in the actual total cost
Okay.
of what it would
Should
be with the
reword
reduction.
that.
So on the out of district, how many kids do we have in that?
It varies year to year. It seems like our highest amount generally comes from Victoria because they no longer offer driver's ed over there. I think some of them more going to Salina. I think less and less are going there and more coming here. A lot of those kids have farm permits already, but I would guess somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 to 12 a year.
And just more of it, again, kind of, maybe if you could run the numbers, both 200, 225, see what that does with just, again, that's my suggestion, it's $25 change. The other concern I have is there just a drop in the number of places, even not just private, but public schools offering driver's ed?
Yes.
Because I know we've been contacted.
I think the biggest reason is because of the cost. When I started, it was free. Because back then, obviously, we had more luxurious budgets here and had more state funding for everything, and it was important enough at that time that our district covered the complete cost for everybody.
Right.
But as our budget reduced, we couldn't cover it anymore, so we had to gradually charge. It went from 0 to like 15, then to 25 to 50 to, I think our highest may have been 350 possibly, something like that. It got very expensive at one time.
Yeah.
And then when our enrollment drops, we had to charge more to cover the expenses. We used to have to lease our cars, which was about $10,000 to $12,000 per year. And when we switched our program, I went to different dealerships and got all of them to donate cars instead, so we no longer have a lease fee, which just saves us about $12,000 a year.
Okay.
So James Motor Company does 2 cars right now, Auto World does 2 cars right now, and Hayes City does 2 cars right now.
And do you have any future problems with staffing with certified?
No, I don't actually. I'm lucky in that respect because I've had 2 student teachers the last 2 years. One of our teachers at the high school, student taught last summer, so she'll come on board this year. I still have a couple of retired guys that would like to work, but our contracts allow that being a supplemental contract that we have to employ those that are currently full-time employees first. I know I have another student teacher for next summer already that's interested. So the scary part statewide is that there's not currently an institution in the state of Kansas that is certifying teachers to become driver's ed certified. Last month I talked to the Kansas State Department of Education and also talked to Sean Henderson at Fort Hays and have the wheels turning. Hopefully that Fort Hays will add driver's education certification next fall if everything goes as planned. That's what we're hoping happens.
Why'd you do that? Make some money on that too.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
But it's something has to happen because there are guys my age that are eventually going to retire, and then we have to replace those teachers with driver's ed teachers, and they have to have a place to certify them. Right now,
Maybe a college?
Kearney's the closest one right now that you can do that at. Emporia dropped theirs.
Well, actually, Emporia still has a program, they just haven't offered it. I talked to
Right.
the dean, well, I wanted to know if I was a competition if I put it in.
Yeah, and then
That's
Johnson
John's already
County
talked about that.
has just lost theirs this semester coming up.
Johnson County had a person retired, they were the other place in the state.
That's,
They had a program.
well, part of the problem with Johnson County was they were offering it just for certification, not for graduate credit hours. The KSU wants for graduate credit hours as well.
But Emporia hasn't offered it, but it's still, they still have a certification program.
They're just not offering it.
They lost their instructor, and so they stopped doing it. But yeah, I know Fort Hays is considering it to look at putting certification. That's off topic, I'm sorry.
And we will look at the numbers again and adjust that and come back with a recommendation for action, perhaps at the next board meeting.
With 225 would be 5,000, 50 would be 10,000, so
Easy math.
it's my best subject.
Very good.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. The next thing I see on the agenda is the superintendent evaluation, but I also see that's part of our executive session.
The executive session has to do with questions for the upcoming interview.
Okay, but it
So
says
it's-
and superintendent evaluation on there.
Non-elected personnel.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there something that we need to discuss here in open session on the superintendent evaluation?
No, the form that was used the last is just a matter of agreement that that's what you wish to use again, and as far as starting the process.
Okay. Yes, I will. I see that Greg has a board member request. And anybody else? That was.
I have several, sorry. If we could find out at some point, by email is fine, but just the benchmarks for free and reduced lunch. That would be helpful. I'm sure I could research it, but I just want to make sure I'm getting the right ones. And then on the site council reports, while very informative, is there a outline of what they're to report to us? Or would that be helpful? Just so
To
that
make
way,
them
because
consistent?
one you might have a long one, and another you might get a 5-minute one, and it would be helpful to us and them to say, here's the 4 or 5 things that we want you to cover. when you
I don't
present
know
your
that it's
report.
necessary that they repeat the building issues that we're well aware of.
Yeah, there is not. I mean, the answer to your question is, remember, in the past, they've just given written reports.
Right. No, I understand what they're doing. We still want them to come, but.
Right. To have some consistency between, okay. we can-
Content.
An outline.
And maybe a time frame.
Yes.
And then, John, one of the things I had was you, in one of your emails to us, indicated that you had met with 6 Hayes personnel and 5 others to plan and design the Oak Park. Is that going to be something that comes to the board at some point?
Exactly. We were told last week that there would be a design that would be in play, and we'd be able to see that this week. We don't have a date or time yet this week, but certainly that was to come to you once we have that. And then it was also in plan that there would be an update to the board, if not monthly, maybe some update. Well, monthly may be what's needed, but at least every month there would be an update to the board and a presentation of where we're at that point. So.
And the final thing is, I made the motion, I believe, that we were going to table all discussions of long-range planning and bond issues until January. And it is now January, and I would like to see something on the agenda about long-range planning, not the bond, but long-range planning. I did some research, not lengthy hours of it, but just some quick research, and found some really interesting long-range educational plans, both that attack the facilities and the other planning. And my goal in my search was to see if there was companies that offered this service, and I think there are some, but I can share with the administration what I found. But it just seems to me that whatever we do going forward should start there, and so I didn't want to wait and bring that up after something was on the agenda. I wanted to be proactive about it and ask that it be on there.
And I had already talked to board president about the possibility of using January with some presentation of really identifying where the board, I mean, there needs to be somewhat of a review, and so a presentation at this next meeting, we will have that.
Well, and it might be beneficial too to select somebody, not you, John, sorry, but you're not going to be here after June, but whether it be Keith or Chris or Shanna or all 3 of them to kind of be the experts on that issue, because hopefully they're all carrying on past June 30th.
Well, I agree with that to some degree, but I'd like to think that you're not making me a lame duck at this
I'm not saying
particular
we're not,
point.
but I mean, I think they need to be more integral in it because they're going to be here, or they need to be at least on an equal plane, just because, you know, what I don't want to see is you leave and take all that knowledge with you, and then we're having to call you or something, to whereas we have people here that I would hope could do that, and, you know, maybe they're saying, oh, I can't do that, that's not in my wheelhouse or whatever, but it just seems that that would be more long-range beneficial to us, so.
And I assure you, I will keep them very much informed, and part of it even more so as we go the next several months.
No, I just want to know what, if somebody were to apply, what are the
What were the criteria?
to qualify?
There's an application form. Do you just want to see?
Yeah, he just wants to make sure he has the right one.
I mean, I just,
From our lunch, it's mainly we get it from nutrition service, how they qualify, because that's where I get numbers when I do title, like Wilson said.
I assume there's something that says 2, 3, 4 child family or whatever.
It's actually posted on the website under nutrition services. I can email it to you tonight.
One, just a general keep track of information is seeing where the dyslexia task force actions come out of that. The recommendations went forward, but I am concerned about what unfunded mandates that may put on us as a school district, which could be pretty heavy if it does pass through. So, just
Add that for an update. Yeah.
add that for an update, 'cause it just, it did go forward last week.
It came out end of last week, I saw on some stuff.
There's a lot of reshuffling of what we will have to do without any additional money.
Some of it is solid recommendation, some of it is redundant in the fact that dyslexia is a specific learning disability. That's what we do every day in special education. And so some of it is great, some of it is really
The requirement.
locking the door when the door's already deadbolted. I mean, in a sense, I mean, I understand the concern and there's some really good stuff coming out of it, but some of it.
Right, and I'm just curious about what impact it will have on us, because if some of the things do go through, it looks pretty hefty on the district side. And also for teacher preparation, it's pretty hefty on our side.
Pretty strong recommendation, it looked like from what I've seen.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
When are we doing the superintendent evaluation?
We're going to talk about it up here in just a second.
Make a motion.
Yes, I am. I'm going to. Ready? Come on. I move that the Board of Education recess into executive session under the following exemption to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exemption. The subject to be discussed during executive session is the superintendent interview questions and superintendent evaluation. Open session will resume in this room at 10 o'clock. The persons included is just Board of Education.
Second. We're talking about the questions as well?
Yes. Quickly.
Okay, we got 10 minutes.
Quickly, is that part of your
Quickly.
motion?
Mandy, do you want to call?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay? Motion passes.